Good evening, everyone present. Thank you for being here tonight at the joint performance scrutiny. We have Community Engagement Committee, the Scrutiny Committee with us tonight. Just a reminder, this is a meeting of the Council held in public. This is not a public meeting. There's no fire drill planned, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the exit nearest the large screen at the front of the room and proceed down the fire exit to the courtyard. Once it is safe to return, councillors will receive a text message. Officers will also advise when it is safe to return to the meeting. We are recording the meeting this evening using our webcasting system. The webcast will be transmitted live and will also be available on the council's website following the meeting. All mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so that the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. We have no public in attendance this evening. Okay, so welcome. We have different partners here today, including Morgan Sindall. So we're going to kick off with the Morgan Sindall item, item 5 on the agenda. We have Joe Jameson, Managing Director of Morgan Sindall, and Lucas Borowski. We've met before. So here we are, back again, 6 months later. So I think we can all agree we had a good session on the 17th of September 2024. We were discussing the results of the Council's Tenant Satisfaction Survey, the first conducted in line with new regulations introduced by the Regulator of Social Housing. It's fair to say there were some red flags, especially around the data and the reliability of that data provided by Pentana and the third-party survey app Branton Rave. The day after the committee, there was an away day at Dunton Golf Course with the leader of the council, who, following the discussion we had at the committee, laid out some specific challenges to you, Morgan Sindall, around repairs, complaints, data, contract management and communications. Some of that obviously lies with the council itself. It would be great to hear from you on what progress has been made in the last 6 months, especially as Morgan Sindall is currently on a performance improvement plan. So with that, over to you. Thank you.
Apologies.
No,
sorry for
don't
that.
apologise, Joe. Sorry, Joe. I'm just going to talk over you just for a second, just to give you a chance to reset, because we need to do apologies for absence and declarations of interest.
Yes.
So we've had 2 apologies. We've had 2 formal apologies from Councillor Andrew Schrader, and we've had an apology from Councillor Alan Ball, but we have not received any further apologies. I'm not sure if we're expecting Councillor Blake.
Well, I'll give his apologies, Chairman, but I'm not sure whether he'll be late.
Right, no problems. Okay, everyone else is in attendance, and any declarations of interest from members? Can I take those now? No. Okay, so with that, I've just as well an opportunity to speak into the microphone as clear as you can. Thank you so much. Back over to you again.
Thank you. We're going to cover the KPI performance across the contract and areas of improvement and focus that we have as a partnership, and also give updates against the leader's 5 challenges that he gave at the away day in September as mentioned, and have time for questions and answers obviously at the end of the presentation. It'll be jointly presented by myself and Jonathan, and taking the relevant lead on the relevant sections. So just going on to the KPI performance, I'm going to cover the performance on this slide and cover actions on the next one, just to reaffirm where we are. So firstly, I just want to say that as a team, we are mostly local and live and work within Basildon, and I have a very passionate team that are delivering a great service in some areas, but we do receive some negative feedback in others, and we have to listen and learn from that, which we are already doing, and hopefully that comes through in the presentation today of the areas of focus for us. So just looking at the first item there on tenant satisfaction, which is measured through the independent platform, which is called Rant and Rave. That was procured jointly by Basildon and Morgan Sindall at the beginning of the framework and is completely independent from ourselves. So when information is gathered through Rant and Rave, that is independently selected through the communication details that you have for your residents, and that information goes back to that independent platform. So at no point comes into contact with Morgan Sindall, and the council can see that information at exactly the same time. So I believe last time it was challenged that that we were taking ratings lower than 5 out of 5 against satisfaction. So the satisfaction scores that you see there currently at 83 are just based on the 5 out of 5 rating and no lower than that. So using that measure, the current performance is 83% against the MLAP of 80. The first time fixed performance continues above MLAP at 85.8%, above the 80% threshold there. And then moving on to emergency completions, on the current KPI, we are only achieving 53% against the 2-hour measure on a 99% MLAP. So we will on the next slide cover the proposals from the partnership to move this measure to more of an industry standard, and also the areas of improvement underlying to that. The routine completions with the current mix of works covered under this KPI is only achieving 57.5% against an MLAP of 81%. So we have some significant recommendations in this area to improve the standard of service received on standard routine repairs, but also we've got to recognise measures that are impacting that as well, and some of the recommendations from the strategic core group. So finally, the repairs appointments made and kept continues to be above MLAP of 85%, currently at 87.1%. The current performance column just on that previous slide, I would just like to say that was a snapshot in time when the report was run. So obviously if you look at the end of February, you look at end of March, there's always slight variations to that. So that was a snapshot in time. So we'll just make sure that if there's any variations to that. At most it's kind of 1% that changes positively or negatively, but just to make that point. So just going on to the key actions against these, tenant satisfaction. To further improve the experience the Basildon residents receive from us, we look at areas of improvement that arise out of both the rant and rave feedback that we gain, but also the complaints feedback as well, and look at that trend analysis together to make sure we are looking in the right areas. So some of the trend analysis is showing, particularly through rant and rave, incomplete works being one area of dissatisfaction, time to wait for a call or appointment, wrong trade or part being sent to a repair. So the only other item that comes through from the complaints is miscommunication, and the trend being there. So to tackle these areas, some of the things that we've done so far or is ongoing, we've given additional training, and we've got a training regime at the moment with our call handlers to triage the call better, and that is based on a more detailed script of questions to ask, and really leading that question a lot to get more detailed information out of the individuals reporting the repair. And that's very much a script based on the experience of the repairs that we are dealing with in Basildon at the moment, so it's very specific to what we see. So my head of customer journey has been working with the team for the last 3 weeks on that, and we continue to do training with our both planners, supervisors and call handlers. We've also reviewed the call waiting times, and there are unacceptable times in some of those instances. So we have looked at the peak periods of those calls coming in and introduced extra call handlers into those peak periods. So I think detailed in the paper, but from memory it was 3 additional call handlers on the mornings of Monday and Tuesday, additional call handlers Tuesday afternoon, and then for the rest of the week, one additional call handler 9 till 5 p.m. So we're trying to respond to the peak periods of when we are getting those higher than average call waiting times. And we have seen some great progress over the last 4 weeks since introducing that, of the call waiting times coming down and the call abandonment rates coming down. But it has a long way to go, and we do recognise that we've got to put the resources in there. The other item to really impact this is the reduction of the overall work in progress and what we call WIP. So we've seen a significant reduction over the last 12 months. We had WIP number of cases up at 4,410 in April of last year, and that is down to about 3,100 as at today. And that's despite the time of year. We do always see about 1,000 extra jobs coming through from December to January, which is exactly what we have received this year. So framework delivering 40,000 jobs a year based on the 28-day measure for routine repairs. That's about 3,069 cases per month. So 1 month's WIP is standard for a contract of this size, and you can see the route to the 28 days. So I'll move on to first time fix. This is an area that can be further improved by looking at the properties and the repairs that we have, particularly around multi-trades. So we have quite a few properties that come through that have 4 or more repairs against them at the moment. And what we are proposing with this one is that we actually take them out and look at them potentially as minor works. But for an example, we've got 32 properties that fall into that category of 4 repairs or more, and that equates to about 141 repairs. So we've got to treat them differently, because if we tackle them as individual repairs, then the customer would have 4 or more individual visits. So we're trying to bunch them all together and treat them separately under the contract. The training on the triaging that I mentioned above will also help with the right equipment. We do have very detailed and very specific van stock for the repairs that we deal with within Basildon, but there are also equipment that we just can't physically carry on the vans, and we've got a very strong local supply chain. But with the level of emergencies coming through being at 25%, you do get an impact on routine repairs, because you're having to pre-plan. You know, 25% of what you pre-plan gets diverted to emergencies, so that does impact the ability to do that. But nevertheless, we are always looking at van stock to ensure that we've got the right equipment to take to each individual job. So moving on to the emergency completions, with only 53% of the cases achieving the current target, this is an area of measure that the expectation has to be fit for purpose, and or we revise the operating model to suit. The original model was set up to deal with 10% emergencies on the contract, and we've been predominantly above the 20% and now at 25% for the last number of years. So we've got to respond to that, and that does result in diverted operatives from routine onto emergency. So the original KPI, when based on 10%, was set out to deal with these within a 2-hour window. And the proposal again from the strategic core group is to move this to 24 hours, which is in line with incoming legislation, in particular AWAB's law, and is more in line with your peers around the industry as well. And you know, we work across 30 contracts, so I can say that very confidently. So, as I said, the strategic core group is looking at implementing that 24-hour measure, but we are also tasking the operational core group with reviewing the root cause and the movement from the 10% up to the 25%. There's many things that can impact that, such as the standard of stock, planned investment works that we know has been for the last couple of years more focused around building safety, and that can have an increase in the decency of the stock, but also, you know, expectations post-COVID and reaffirming what is an emergency and what is a routine. We have found that a lot of emergencies that are attended aren't always emergencies. So to reaffirm, this is a mixture of having the correct measure, which would show that we deliver about 98% of emergencies within that 24-hour period, whilst working on the root cause of the emergencies to really reduce this and reduce the impact on routine repairs. So moving on to routine repairs, very much part of the ongoing improvement plan as mentioned, and we have seen a marked improvement in the completion of routine repairs in 28 days with a RIP reduction from the 4,400 I mentioned before down to 3,100. So what we've been doing is looking at the profile of the WIP over that period of time. So Lucas and the team have been looking at the older projects that we have and the older cases that we have coming through. So that every older job that we complete affects the KPI. So we're not just going for the quick and easy stuff that can easily be done within the 28-day period. We are cleaning up older legacy WIP that exists on the framework. So for a short period of time, that is going to affect the KPI whilst we tidy that up. We have 41 jobs on the system, might be 40 today, 40 jobs on the system that predate August 24, when the improvement plan was put into place, with the oldest being January 2024. So some of those cases that are those older projects might be significant structural issues where we're having to do structural reports or further more detailed surveys on the properties, etc., that are leading to those longer leading periods. So as I said, there's 40 jobs that there. Just to put it into perspective, since August, since we started the improvement plan, 24,000 jobs have been completed, with 21,000 of those delivered within 26 days. So there are some falling out of that still, but we're tidying up the legacy issues as we're going along to really make a positive impact in that in the medium term. Also affecting the ability to achieve the KPI at the moment is the level of no access, because this is a real disruptor to the service. Looking back at the average within 2017 to 2019 and that 3-year period, the no access was around 2,250. So that was already quite high against industry. But the last 3 years, the actual average is 3,464, reaching a high last year of 3,656. So essentially, we're getting 10% of the jobs that we're completing having no access issues. So administering that part of it again needs to be very firm on all sides and really understanding why we're getting the no access issues. Because I'm certainly not putting the blame of no access issues against the residents. It's a mixture of items there, but we've got to administer the two no access protocol and then look at the reasons for that and reaffirm that. And my team have been guilty of just continuing with the no access and trying to get access to the property to complete the repair, and we need to administer that more firmly ourselves. And then the last item really against routine repairs is minor works. So when you think of a routine repair, you think of maybe a leaking tap, a door handle that's come loose. You might think of a heating system that wouldn't switch back on in October and somebody being called out to that. What we are seeing is just looking at last year, we had about 350 jobs in total, totalling over £1.2 million worth of investment, which is ranging from repairs that are £2,000 up to repairs that are £40,000. And they are measured in the same way. So sometimes there's repairs like that is a new land drain, which is a significant amount of work that's been measured in the same window as the door handle or the heating system and stuff like that. So the minor works team that we've discussed as a team is something that we're proposing to take that out and measure that as a separate SLA, so obviously with its own SLA to recognise that. Again, this is very consistent with other contracts that we have, and the demographic of the repairs has certainly changed over the last number of years, with kind of 2 years of very limited planned maintenance within the COVID period and limited routine repairs. Emergency was really propping up those properties over that period of time. So it's a consistent theme you see coming through from other local authority areas as well. The complexity of the routines are heavier. Okay, so finally on this section, repair appointments made and kept, currently above the MLAP of 87.1. And the main focus area is not just about the performance in this area that's recorded in the KPI, but it's the stuff that's not shown in the KPI. It's about tackling the no access issues that I've mentioned, but also the emergency repairs, because for every emergency repair that we're getting through, sometimes routine appointments have to be rescheduled when they are higher than the operating model allows for, higher than the 10%. So driving down those emergencies and understanding that more will help this score as well, and satisfaction. So I'm going to hand you over to Jonathan, who's going to take the 5 leaders challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Jo. So, as Councillor Callaghan mentioned, we'd had a day in September 24 with 35 people from BBC and Morgan Sindall who've been involved in the contract in various roles. And this was at the beginning of that improvement plan implementation. And at the beginning of that session, the leader stood up and set out 5 political priorities. As already mentioned, repairs, complaints, data, contract management and communications. And we'll just touch on all of those now briefly. Repairs, so I mean Jo's covered some of this and the paper also goes into more detail, but the changing requirements and the legislations and the changing profile of our repairs means we have to respond to these changes, and we have to do that in the contract and in the way that the contract tells us to. So we are discussing our strategic core group revised service level agreements for emergency repairs and introduction of a new SLA or service level agreement for the minor work and disrepair. It's a huge bit of work, but it's the right thing to do. The operating model is being revised to provide more resources on these complex cases, and look, we do have a lot of complex cases, and I want you to remember that we're a new town that's got housing stock that's 70 plus years old, and it's all the same age, which is quite unique in this environment. We've also got a lot of damp and mould and disrepair. These quantities have increased massively. The continued work on reducing the work in progress continues, and this will naturally reduce that KPI around routine repairs. And as you've heard, these repairs from the 1st of August, excluding the legacy WIP, have actually achieved 26.1 days against the MLAP of 28 days. And we'll come on to data later, but in repairs we are trying to use data we have intelligently around our repairs and maintenance services, which should inform our planned investment programmes with a clear focus on elements of the highest need for call-outs, such as roofing, windows and doors, but also key estates that require more investment. But of course we have a set budget for plan works, and we are guided by that every year.
Okay, I'm going to jump back in on complaints. So, you know, we fully understand that as local councillors and MPs, you hear a lot of the negatives through complaints that come directly to yourself, and we do take every complaint seriously. We want everybody to receive the same experience. We want everybody to be rating us 5 out of 5. That's the ultimate goal. You know, so the lessons learned and trends are key to improving this. So I covered some of those in the tenant satisfaction. But the performance of the service has been under obviously a level of scrutiny. So I just wanted to put it into perspective, the kind of number of complaints that we receive as a partnership. So from April 2024 to February 25, we had over 38,000 jobs raised, with 939 complaints logged against that. So that equates to about 2.4% receiving a complaint. The overall performance across the overall partnership is 4%. So based on the national average from the English Housing Survey, nationally it's 7% and within London it's 9%. So I'm not saying that to excuse complaints. We do take every single one seriously, but it's just about putting those numbers into perspective, because your individual inboxes, you receive what you receive, and I fully understand that. So as outlined in the tenant satisfaction, we do ensure we're continually improving and taking the root causes from the complaints and the negative ratings on rant and rave, and we are going further with the rant and rave. Before we were just reading the rant and rave data coming back for the ratings of 1. Now we're making phone calls to those individuals, getting far more detail around why they've put a certain rating, why they've put a certain comment, to get a better understanding as to ensuring we are tackling the right root cause for that. So response rate on complaints, you can see the live tracker that we just put up there of 178. There's been a lot of work jointly with MSPS and the council over the last 4 weeks, with some dedicated resource on that, looking at the open complaints on the tracker, that did allow a lot of those complaints to be closed down that responses had gone back for and the actions had been taken. So that is a joint tracker now and one version of the truth rather than having separate trackers, and we're ensuring that is being reviewed on a weekly basis. The rant and rave scores you can see there equate to the 83% that I said, with scores out of 5 out of 5, but we do have 9.5% at a rating of 1. So it's important to note of all the complaints that we receive, there's 86.4% again as a partnership, because we respond to them jointly when we're jointly involved, are responded to in target. So we do need to increase that above the 86.4. And of the complaints received, 22% are not upheld, 54% partially upheld, and 23% fully upheld. Okay, I'll move on complaints. Back to yourself, Jonathan.
Okay, so we've already outlined that we're trying to use data in an intelligent manner to inform our planned work investment, but this obviously has to be balanced against the investment in our stock to ensure compliance with the Building Safety Act and new legislation such as Awab's law. That's been a national movement, that's not just us. Obviously we have to follow the legislation. The strategic core group now has a greater focus on data for both compliance, performance and decision making, and this will only continue to improve with the progression of the Council's digital strategy. We're also renewing our housing management system and our asset management systems, which will provide greater access and analysis of all our property management data. This is due for implementation towards the end of this year. We're also making a few changes internally around roles, the first being a dedicated contract manager who will chair the operational and the newly formed commercial core group and take a lead on the sort of KPI management and reporting to Scrutiny, CLT, Housing Improvement Board and the Property and Assets Board. We are recommending we have a third-party moderator. We used to have Echelon. It makes sense to bring them back to chair the strategic core group and provide that independent governance. And we are introducing this commercial core group with terms of reference to be agreed at the next strategic core group to give clear guidance on attendees and roles. We're also establishing, well, we have established a new disrepair manager role in addition to a current one, as we recognise we need to respond quicker to disrepair in the current legal landscape.
Okay, so finally on the challenges from the Leader of the Council, improving resident communication. This is absolutely key to creating a positive customer journey. So we've introduced the weekly drop-in sessions that have been received very well. And we've tried them in evenings, we've tried them Saturdays, and actually the response is better during the week here in the BAS Centre. But we will always respond to if there are excuse me, specific requests to do those drop-in centres in specific ward areas as well. We're definitely open to that, and we've discussed that as a team about introducing it. So 328 sessions held to date, 360 residents attended, and 217 repairs completed from those drop-in sessions. So positive experience for some who've been involved in that. As I said before, we've introduced the additional call handlers. We've got 50% of those in place. The other 50% are starting next week. So we will see, again, a continued improvement in the call handling and waiting time for calls and abandonment of those. Where there are cancellations, planners are also contacting residents 24 hours ahead of their appointments to try and stop the non-access issues. That's not 100% across the board yet. We're kind of trying, we're pushing to get that there, but we're really trying to address the no access issues and do that. But we will get that to 100% across the board. Where there are cancellations, planners are providing these slots early for residents as well. So we've been very proactive about offering residents earlier slots and so they can bring their appointments forward and managing that capacity that we have. We're also going to work more structured way with the council about the no accesses over 2 visits, because as I said, we haven't administered that as much as the council also. I'm just trying to plug away at trying to get into a property to complete a repair. So we'll do that in a more structured way. We've also got a communication officer that's been recruited by ourselves, but to work exclusively on the contract, to share information, get more transparency, and help with attendance at ward committee meetings and other various different forums to help communicate to the residents. Okay, so we hope the presentation along with the paper and supporting information has given a more detailed insight into the performance, and happy to open it up to questions.
Thank you, Jo. So just to be clear, for the benefit of all members present, I'm going to use the Chair's prerogative to ask all the questions I have prepared from the detailed reports and materials that we've received from Basildon Council officers, as well as that helpful presentation there. If members would like to come in, please raise your hand and you'll be called when specific questions have been answered satisfactorily. And the Vice Chair will help me keep track of hands and the order. So, Jo, this one's for you and Lucas, I think. And Jonathan, I would say. So, in April 2023, KPIs for tenant satisfaction, appointments kept, and repairs completed within 28 days were all lowered by up to 10%. Who signed off on the downgrading of these KPIs?
I think I'll start on that. I think this was raised at our operational group around that time. Just trying to remember the dates. I think that was the time then which I took over the contract. What was that time, wasn't it?
Probably.
Yeah. Obviously, there was a bit of turmoil in the council at that point in time, as lots of directors were leaving at that point. It was raised as an issue that we found some inaccuracies in some data, and then we went through it and put them right as we saw it at that time. I can't recall exactly who signed it off, whether it was pre me joining, me taking over, or post.
It was when Leslie and Andy were still here. It was then, wasn't it? 24 was last year.
Sorry, 23,
23.
yes, sorry, that was Leslie and Mandy, sorry. We're 25 now, aren't we? Yeah, we're not 24.
So you weren't.
Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, it's
Jonathan, just to recap, so this was made by the former Deputy Chief Executive of Basildon Council and the former Director of Housing and Property. They made a decision to lower the KPIs to 10% on this contract in April 2023. Is that correct? And my follow-up question is,
Yep.
What political oversight was there on the decision? Did it go to Cabinet?
no, so under the terms of the contract, those sorts of decisions are made within the strategic core group. And under the terms of that contract, we agree appropriate levels based on circumstances. I don't think it went to Cabinet, that was not it did come to scrutiny though, in that period. And there is a scrutiny report detailing that.
Okay, so did the then leader of the council know that these KPIs would be lowered? And did the cabinet member for housing at the time, who sadly sent his apologies this evening, did he know about this decision before it was made? And did he agree to it?
I can't answer that because I was not privy to those conversations at that time.
Okay.
And apologies, I've only been in post 12 months as well, so I wasn't here present for that, and neither was Lucas.
Okay, question here to Councillor Kerry Smith, current Director of Housing, Cabinet Member for Housing. Yep. If you were informed of a plan to downgrade Morgan Sindall's performance KPIs around tenant satisfaction, appointments kept and repairs completed, would you accept this plan as a good idea?
If you're paying the same money, a terrible idea. Why would you pay the same for less? Why would you? If you was paying for a silk tie and you got a polyester one for the same money, you wouldn't buy it, would you?
Yeah, so as Councillor Smith says, there's no reference to the payment per property that Morgan Sindall receives for our housing stock each year being amended on the back of this lowering of KPIs. I don't think any councillor in their right mind would agree to a lowering of key performance indicators around the council's biggest contracts, around 12,500 housing stock and 5,500 garages. I don't believe that members would agree to that willingly. And so I think that off the back of this meeting, I'd like to say to the clerk, I need to write to councillors Baggott and Schrader to understand from them whether they were briefed on the decision to lower these KPIs in April 2023. And I'm just going to say that if there was no oversight from members, then I think it's safe to say that this was an officer decision, right? That I believe that councillors should have had oversight on, they should have been informed. And I'll just bring Kerry Smith in once, just because you are the current cabinet member for housing and property.
Thank you. We don't know if this was officers' work or members' work. We can't get a clear answer on that tonight. We have lots of money being spent, in excess of over £1 million, that came in the most recent cabinet report, on disrepair. Can this come to audit and risk to see that just to go over this decision making has left this council open to more disrepair claims or future disrepair claims, or when we eventually get a visit from the government's housing improvement board, this goes against us because we don't have a time machine and there should be proper protocols in place. So when we downgrade a KPI, it's got to be in the council's interest at all times. And when I say the council, the taxpaying public and our tenants and leaseholders.
Thank you. And I would say, as chair of the Performance Scrutiny Committee, it is unacceptable that we don't have these answers. We have a very thorough report. You know, the answers around member oversight. We need to investigate that. You know, Councillor Kerry Smith, perhaps, you know, there's something you can follow up on and maybe discuss how to reinstate the original KPIs so we get more value for money. We'll move on, we'll talk about this some more. So the report compares tenant satisfaction in Basildon, currently at 79.4%, to the UK services industry average of 74.1%, implying this performance is acceptable, but this figure is still below both the original target of 95% and the revised minimum level of acceptable performance of 85%. So just to be clear, the revised target of 85%, that was lowered down from 95% in April 2023 by officers, it seems, who thought this was a great idea for the council. Question, is it appropriate to benchmark social housing services against retail and transport sectors rather than housing specific standards like Housemark or the tenant satisfaction measures introduced by the regulator?
In my opinion, yes. I think 95% tenant satisfaction is probably unreasonable and, yeah, unachievable at the current levels that we pay for the contract.
I mean, we don't pay a small amount for the contract, I would say. So just to be clear, this contract has been in place since 2016. It had original KPIs that everyone agreed to. It was developed by a number of bodies, Echelon being one of them. We'll get to them later, Devonshire's, Morgan Sindall and Basildon Borough Council. And 6 years into the contract, these KPIs are lowered by Mandy Skeet, the former Deputy Council Chief Executive of the Council, and Leslie O'Shea, the former Director of Housing and Property. It's unclear whether councillors have had any oversight. Tenant satisfaction is under the revised KPI, and we are saying that's fine because it's above slightly the UK services industry average of 74.1%. And what message does this send to our tenants that they should expect supermarket level service from their landlord? Is that acceptable?
No, but it is trending upwards, and we are working hard to increase that tenant satisfaction measure.
Okay, thank you. There's been no minimum level of acceptable performance target for emergency repairs since April 2023. Performance is currently 52.3%. Why was the minimum level of accepted performance, the MLAP, you'll hear that word a lot today, for emergency repairs removed entirely from the system, leaving a high-risk service without any formal accountability threshold?
So, as we mentioned in the data, the contract was originally supposed to have about 10% emergency repairs. It grew to 25%, which would have been unachievable to get there within 2 hours with the current resources in place. And it was felt that 2 hours wasn't necessarily industry standard or something we needed, or something we could sustain as a service. And the way that we record it just meant that we were shackled by that 2 hours. So there was a decision made that we would loosen that slightly to make sure that we got to the cases that we had to get to that were real emergencies as soon as possible.
Was this a decision made by officers again, without member oversight?
So as part of the contract, we have the ability under the core group to make these decisions and changes to the contract as we see fit.
Thank you. Before I move on to the strategic core group, which I'm very intrigued to know more about, and I think that a lot of people in this room would be as well, the report admits that some emergency repairs are being logged as routine. Has this put residents at risk, for example, in cases involving damp, black mould or electrics, by leaving them waiting at least 28 days?
Apologies, could you just point out in the report where it states that they've been logged as routine? I was not aware of that being in the report.
Sorry, Joe, it is in there.
Okay, I'm not aware of any emergency cases being logged as routine.
In the report, it says that some emergency repairs are being logged as routine, owing to the volume of emergency repairs logged. It's around the part where it says the report cites that the introduction of the Renters' Right Act and AWAB's law in 2025 means that social landlords will be forced to investigate and fix and repair all emergency hazards within a 24-hour time frame.
When I made the comment about things being triaged and sometimes attending emergency repairs that weren't emergencies, we're still treating them as emergency repairs. We're not taking them out and then treating them as routine repairs. what we're saying is sometimes we're attending emergencies that are recorded as emergencies and they actually turn out to be routine. We're still carrying out that repair, but what I'm saying is it takes resources out of the routine repair resources that we use.
Okay, to keep the pace going, page 31 shows that Morgan Sindall performs well on the one KPI that has been lowered since 2016, which is R3, the percentage of repairs completed on the first visit. The original minimum level of accepted performance was 90%, currently on 80%, year-to-date performance is 86.9%. Are we rewriting the rules to mask underperformance?
I can't comment on why the MLAPs were changed April 23 because we're not involved in that process personally. But I would say that the first time fix MLAP as it stands and Target at the moment are in line with industry standards. So I don't believe that Basildon are accepting a lower standard of key performance indicators for this area.
The point is that when we went into the contract, we agreed levels of performance indicators that we pay for, basically. Okay? And I'm just going to just bypass a few questions I have around the strategic core group and talk about profitability, because as we know, performance is related to profitability. Joe, are you on course to meet your profit margin of 8% this year? And will 2024-2025 be the first year since 2016-17 in which the 8% contractual target is achieved?
No, I don't think we are on track to do that. As I said before, we have introduced additional call handlers into the team and looking at additional resources around some of the complex repairs. So we have put investment into that as well. So that does impact the profitability of our business in that area. So I know it's tracked up in 23 to 24 to 7.81%. But I think it would either be online with that or slightly lower.
Thanks. Just because it's relevant, may I ask a question about the strategic core group that Jonathan mentioned before? What is the strategic core group? Who are its members and what is its role in relation to contract oversight?
So the way the contract is managed in this partnership contract is via a strategic core group. That was Mandy, who was the chair up until when she left. I did it on an interim basis. Now Christine is, as the executive director, chairs that group. Under the terms of the contract, this meets regularly. Terms of reference are set out in the contract, but under the spirit of the partnership, terms of that contract can be changed as market conditions change. And on a long-term contract, it'd be very rare to not change terms of the contract as the marketplace changes. Obviously, since this contract, we've had COVID, we've had biggest cost inflation in history. We've had legislation, we've had social housing regulators and building safety regulators come in, which has completely changed the environment for repairs and maintenance. So if the wider sort of marketplace, a lot of the contractors have gone from this marketplace. It's a very, very different world, and we've had to react accordingly. We're also in a unique position, as I mentioned earlier, and I can't keep stressing this enough. A lot of our stock is at an age which is very unusual. Because it's a new town, it's all built at the same time, we're getting a lot of structural problems, a lot of problems that other councils don't necessarily get because of the mix of their stock. And the contract has to change accordingly. The strategic core group is the mechanism to do that.
Can you define regularly how many times the strategic core group do meet to discuss this contract and the work streams and what's in scope and all the things that from the outset were pinned as flexible?
Yeah, so it was every month. We're now proposing it goes to every 2 months, and we're introducing this commercial group where we just look at performance and KPIs and figures and procurement separately. So we take that out of the mix. The operational group is supposed to feed into the core group, so we're escalating up any issues to be talked at strategic level and agreed.
And after that, we're just bringing in the Housing Improvement Board, So the outcomes from the strategic board will then be moved up into the housing improvement board, and then that will be escalated straight to the chief executive and on to cabinet. So we're creating a golden thread approach, which was never there before. So it's not just going to, we're creating a better way of responding to challenges that come up from all those groups, up from the contract to the housing improvement board, onto the chief executive and then onto cabinet. So there'll be a greater oversight in terms of what's happening, and any challenges like what I think you're talking about now will come through that proper formal process, which I don't think we had in place at the time that the contract came in.
Thank you. So I think this takes me back to this point about ageing stock. So, you know, we know when we entered the contract that we were a new town. Yes, so everything was built at once. We get that. So going back to profitability. So Joe, you mentioned that, you know, you're not going to hit your 8% profit margin again this year. There's been quite a lot of volatility in your profit margin, which we'll kind of get into. But in year 7, which is 2022-23, Morgan Sindall recorded a 1.6 million loss on planned works due to insufficient volume of works approved by Basildon Council. Can we understand more about this planned works programme, which in the reports delivered by Echelon, who we haven't quite got into yet, but you know, they were the architects of the contract, described as a moderator, is recommended in the report that we bring them back after they were removed from the strategic core group in 2023. So they write recommendations in their deep dive report every year, and they flagged numerous times that this issue of an absence of a planned works programme. So Joe, could you tell us more about how that's affected your profitability in this contract?
From not being in the business at that time. I mean, I would suggest that the timing of that would be more to do with the COVID impact of planned works at the time, because obviously for a period of circa 2 years, there was very little planned work activity because people weren't wanting people to access their properties apart from through the emergency repairs that was absolutely required, or compliance items such as gas compliance, where we're legally obliged to gain access to the properties to do that. So I would suggest that it was more to do with the fact that we wouldn't have been able to carry out those works in tenanted properties at that period of time.
With the access point, so we mentioned that we have a lot of missed appointments, would you class them as, when there's no access? So from memory, there's about 3,300 missed appointments in one section. There's like 7,700 missed gas appointments under a year cited in this report, and there's over 1,000 failed appointments per month. Does the council still get charged for missed appointments? Is that correct?
No, the two access regime sits with ourselves. So we carry out 2 visits of no access, and then if no access is not achieved on that second visit, then it's handed back to the council. That is done strictly on the gas contract, because obviously it's incredibly important that we can get access to those properties to carry out compliancy works on and stuff such as gas boilers. So I think on the gas statistics last year, we had about 70 cases where the gas went into non-compliance through no access, and they were all handed back to the council for the housing management team to arrange access for those crucial works.
So just to be clear for my benefit, the council doesn't get charged for missed appointments?
No, not a little bit, but after 2 it gets handed back. But as I said, on the routine repairs, we have been, pushing to try and get access into those properties. So we are having to introduce that to protocol into that, which is under the contract. But sometimes we've been trying to do 3 visits, 4 visits to try and get access to carry out works that have been reported by the residents.
Are we blaming tenants, or are we implementing modern solutions like smart locks, weekend access, or predictive engagement, or override keys, which I've heard from residents who've reported to me? Other contractors actually use override keys to get into certain blocks, and have actually told me that they've been redirected to Morgan Sindall to get these override keys for access?
To be honest with you, I'm sorry. There wasn't a discussion about that yet. Actually, it's something that we definitely could consider. Don't know what would be the actual response from the residents. How would they feel about someone entering the property in their absence?
So just to be clear, there are smart solutions we could implement which avoid the recommendation in the report or the note in the report that says we could start charging tenants for missed appointments. So there's other ways to get around this issue, just to be clear.
I mean, again, the Chair, I would like to stress to you that currently there is no charge for no accesses. Even if we making multiple attempts, sometimes 3 or 4 attempts, especially if we know that, for example, a resident who lives in that particular property is a vulnerable person. So obviously we go into extra lengths to ensure that we're exhausting all the possible avenues to deliver that repair. And even in those cases, there's no charge to the council.
Sorry, Councillor Callaghan, this relates to the recommendations that we've put at the end, and it's basically this comes around we are reviewing the tenant handbook at the moment, and the tenant handbook obviously is about what's expected of a tenant who is in a Basildon council property as a landlord, and we're reviewing. I don't say we're going to implement it. The position is that once there's been 2 accesses and it's been a failed access, then it will come back to the housing officers to deal with the matters. I think the point is that the council has to ensure that we can undertake those repairs. We haven't put that currently in the new tenants handbook, but that would have to go through the tenants handbook. We couldn't agree to do that here and now, and that's just an option we're looking at, and that's one of the recommendations. It says we're reviewing if recharging residents where residents are responsible for issues under the terms of their tenancy agreement. This needs to involve the management of a. So I think, from our perspective, we wouldn't look at that as an immediate response, but it's something we'll look at in terms of the tenants handbook, which they sign up to, because I think it works both ways, and we are making sure that our housing officers are responsible. If we have multiple non-accesses, the housing officers get involved, and our only option would be an injunction, and the cost to the council and the tenant of an injunction is significant. So we have to look at ways of ensuring we can get access without going down that legal route, which is probably not the best thing you want from one of our tenants anyway. So it's that balance, isn't it? And that'll be as part of the tenant management handbook that we're looking at updating at the moment, and that's currently with consultants to review that.
So we've touched on the fact that Morgan Sindall have made a loss of their profit margins, and it sounds like you make further losses around missed appointments when your subcontractors can't get into properties. So it looks like, looking at the profit margin by financial year, so we were helpfully handed over a lot of background reports to go through a year-on-year basis. It seems that the contract itself has not delivered an 8% profit margin since year 1. And in year 6, Morgan Sindall posted a negative 2.7% loss. Would you describe the contract as currently functional or failing?
I think it's functional now. I think every contractor working in the repairs and maintenance space made losses during the COVID period and the subsequent high inflation period after that. There's a lot of our competitors in this market that went into administration in that period of time. There is one significant contractor, even in the headlines today, that's probably going to go into administration in the next number of days, that is citing that the COVID impact is a massive part of that, and the subsequent inflationary issues. So, I mean, I think that it's functioning now. We've, as a group, posted significant losses in our structure over those number of years as well. So Basildon framework in particular is not out of kilter with those other frameworks that we've worked upon. But because we're part of a strong group structure in the Morgan Sindall group, the rest of the group has been able to support us as an individual business within the group.
Thanks, Jo. Over the life of the contract, I think it's fair to say profit margins for Morgan Sindall have fluctuated significantly. from 11.2% in year 1 to a huge loss in year 6, which was the 2021-2022 period, then back up to over 7% triumphantly in 2022-2023, the same year that you've laid out all the, you know, economic hardship that was impacting the sector at the time. That's when you started to make a recovery phase, adding 6.42% percentage points on your profit margin that year, and then heading, it seems, straight into 2023-2024 with a plus 4.8 percentage point increase on your profit margin to your best performance since year 1. So looking from year 1 down to year 8, there seems to be a really big low point in the COVID affected year, as we've seen, which is 2020-2021. The only loss-making year happened the year after, 2021-2022. And then we go back up to recovery, on track to her best performance ever in 2022-2023. The same year that Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget was impacting families. The Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, was sacked because mortgage prices were going through the roof. 11.1% inflation, we'll all remember, going to do your weekly shop costing over £300, materials being, you know, inflated wildly. You know, they'd already been impacted in 2016 by Brexit, we know that. But 2022-2023 was a terrible year financially for the whole country. Yet recovery phase begins for Morgan Sindall. What happened and what changed in 2023?
Works commenced. We did, you know, again, as we talked about, the planned works element of the framework was very, very disrupted for those COVID years, and then plans, you know, started coming back into fruition in 22-23 and 23-24. So we've had a larger planned maintenance investment in that period of time than we have repairs for the previous years.
Do we have a planned works programme Basildon Council signed off on then? Is that something that didn't come through in the report? It seems like there was an absence of a planned works programme, even though noises were made to develop it in 2019.
So we focused on repairs in this report, but we have a planned work programme. We'd be happy to bring that to scrutiny at a later date.
Okay, so members here weren't aware that there was a planned works programme, which does include repairs, because if we said it's ageing stock that we're dealing with,
No,
the
so
repairs.
Responsive repairs are separate to plan works.
Right. So my point is that it wasn't clear in the report that we received that the profit that Morgan Sindall were making was improving because of planned works programme. That's not apparent to us. If it's separate, then it needs to have been included because it is part of the bigger picture. If that's what caused this triumphant recovery in Morgan Sindall's profit margins in 2022-2023, because on the surface of it, for me, it looks like when the KPIs went down, the profit went up. And something else happened in 2023, which we haven't quite touched on, around the strategic core group. Can we talk about Echelon for a minute? Because the recommendation in the report is that we will drastically improve the performance of this contract if we bring Echelon, who are consultants, okay? They were also the architects of the contract. They have specialist knowledge in social housing management. They were working alongside Devonshire's and Basildon Borough Council in 2016 on the contract itself. So Echelon are, we've been told, bringing them back into the strategic core group would be something that dramatically improves this contract. But why were they removed from the group in April 2023?
Do you want to answer that?
They never were removed as such. They were. What happened? There was a whole review. Our previous deputy chief executive and our previous director were going through a whole review of the core groups, as it were, the operational core group and the strategic core group. And they started to use another consultant who was working for us at the time, and they started to use her services to kind of do what Echelon would normally do. So they weren't removed as such. I don't think you'll find a paper to remove them. I don't think there was any discussion about removing them. They were just not invited back to any of the groups. True.
Sorry, just to... Okay. You weren't not invited, you just weren't... No, sorry, you weren't removed, you just weren't invited to the group, okay?
Pretty much.
Okay. So let's go back to Echelon again. So every single year they present a deep dive report, and members here tonight have looked at a volume of reports from Echelon, yeah? We've seen 8 years of reports, some up to 98 pages. Okay, so every single year they provide this contract, so the 2 members of this contract, with a deep dive around Morgan Sindall's profitability, which is where I got my data from. And they raise red flags and they make recommendations, yeah? So in the report, I'm just going to go to this point here. Echelon's annual audits have consistently flagged serious financial anomalies and state that Basildon Council may have paid a minimum of approximately 26.64 million in questionable or unjustified charges to Morgan Sindall. Okay, this is me going through all of them over the weekend, and I don't mind laying them out one by one. So in first year even, there were labour costs misallocated to just 3 properties. So they go through big table, they say how much each property, how much it costs to do a repair there. The average in Basildon is about 250, so it's, you know, it's a large housing stock, repairs aren't very, very expensive. But there are another side of the table, which is higher expensive jobs of £1,500 plus. In 1 year, there were 3 properties that had labour costs of 26 million each recorded. Yeah. We don't know. Nobody knows. But it's there in black and white in the Echelon report, and they flag it instantly and they say, this can't be right. This needs to be looked into. The recommendation is look into it straight away. Okay? There's £300,000 in unexplained vehicle running cost increases. There's £684 charged for cancelled jobs. I don't think we charged the council for cancelled jobs, but I will say as well, this was a 1% sample because post-2023, when they weren't invited to the party, they weren't removed, they were just not invited, they are making requests to both Morgan Sindall and the council for paperwork which can show them, you know, why each individual cost has been charged and the rationale for all of them. Okay, so they use a sample of 1% in 1 year, and they say that £684 has been charged to Basildon Council outside of the money we already pay for cancelled jobs. But we've heard it from the horse's mouth. We don't charge the cancelled jobs to Basildon Council. Okay, so there's £87,000 in unaccounted internal management charges, and then £250,000 in fencing exclusions. This is interesting. So exclusions are anything that's not paid for as part of the contract, yeah? So it seems that every single year that they have fencing repairs that need to be done that cost £250,000, £500,000 some years, and none of this is included in the contract, even though Echelon, our friends who are invited to the party, remember, they say every single year, make fencing repairs part of the original contract and you'll save Basildon Council millions of pounds, right? And then we've also got strange items, which are materials they flag. So there are not receipts, there's not invoices. When they follow up on these materials and why it costs Basildon Council so much money, they get an application for payment, which is from a subcontractor usually, each costing £5,000 here, £6,000 here. When they go into it, they don't know, they can't see the invoice or the receipt for the actual materials. They just get a request to pay that's being paid by Basildon Council. So Echelon, every single report you look at in Echelon, they're raising red flags, recommendations. I recommend that you look into this. I recommend that Morgan Sindall provide the receipts. Yeah? And every single year they say this until in 2023, we just don't invite them back to the strategic core group. We go with another consultant who probably doesn't cause as many problems. Am I right?
No,
No.
no, no.
So they still do our open book reviews every year as per the original contract. Yeah. And when we get those, all their data is investigated and checked against our systems. Nick leads on that every year. Fencing, I'll let Pete talk about because there's quite a history to fencing in the borough.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have very, very high levels of fencing in Basildon. We spend an awful lot of money on fencing in Basildon. And it mostly stems from, well, two things. There's a high demand for high fencing in Basildon. Everyone seems to want to have a high fence. Basildon was predominantly a lot of open plan properties when it was designed and built. And people just don't like to live with open plan. They like to have their areas fenced off. So there was a high demand on fencing in Basildon. But mostly, in August 2016, a wall fell down in Fleetway in Bange and crushed a 6-year-old child. And that prompted a fencing management plan to be drafted by Basildon Council. And what that management plan done was said that all walls, if they were seen to be in any state of disrepair, then they should be taken down and replaced with fences. So we have a very high level of fencing in Basildon, as I say, predominantly because of Nadia, little Nadia being crushed by a wall in August 2016, which was a private property, incidentally, not one of ours.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And obviously, all our hearts go out to that poor family and that poor kid. You know, we've all got children ourselves, more, you know, and nobody likes those kind of stories. But I will say, wouldn't that make more sense to put fencing in the contract rather than take it out? You're talking about walls being replaced by fencing. So when you, in 2016, when the tragedy happened, get together with Morgan Sindall, get together with Echelon, get together with Devonshires, who are also part of it, wouldn't it have made sense to put fencing repairs in the contract?
Fencing repairs were in the contract. Fencing replacement, lengths of fencing weren't in the contract. So fencing repairs were in the contract. They were an inclusion. And if we do more than one panel, or if we do 3 or 4 panels of fencing, it becomes an exclusion because it's over the threshold for an inclusion. It's outside the PPP. Fencing repairs are in the PPP.
Okay, so they're included, but for a number of years, repeatedly, it's Echelon are saying that we're paying £250,000, some years £500,000 of the years for fencing exclusions that could have been included in the core contract. Okay, and then when they follow up, they don't have any solid evidence that those should have been exclusions. There's no discussion about it. Someone just logs them as exclusions and charge Basildon Council.
Again, each works order is scrutinised by one of Basildon's surveyors. So when Morgan Sindall put an application through their MSI system, which we have access to, one of Nick's team will be sat looking at that, and we can see from photographs. So the raw data that you're seeing from Echelon wouldn't paint that picture. You wouldn't be seeing the photographs, you wouldn't be seeing the new panels, you wouldn't be seeing the new gravel boards and the new posts, and you wouldn't be counting off the linear meters. It wouldn't give you that level of detail. When the application comes through, you would see that detail.
Who is seeing that detail if it's not Echelon, who are paid, I imagine, to do these deep dive reports and to audit every single element of the contract?
What happens is each year, Echelon have been retained for the duration of the contract for two main reasons. One is as an independent partner and advisor, because this is not a basic client contractor contract. It's a partnering agreement, a TPC 2005 partnering contract. And under the terms of that contract, you set up core groups. So you have an operational core group and a strategic core group. And Echelon were retained as an independent partnering advisor under the terms of that TPC agreement and as an independent cost consultant. So each year we receive a notification from Echelon that says we are due to do our open book review. What would you like us to drill down on this year? Are there any elements that you'd like us to drill down on? We then return that and say, we're happy for you to do these elements. And then what happens is they call upon Morgan Sindall for the raw data covering the elements that we want drilled down on. And then Morgan Sindall provide that raw data. Echelon do what they can with that raw data as our independent cost consultant. When we receive the draft open book review, that draft used to come to me. It's now Nick Eady in that role. So Nick has got a team of people that will go through that draft, because Echelon will sample and say, this isn't, they've put this down as an exclusion. Should this be an exclusion? Because potentially this has cost you X number of pounds. Nick's team will then go through that report and scrutinise it, go into each individual job and look to see why it is on there as an exclusion and not as a inclusion under PPP. Or he'll look at Nick and his team will look to see what the anomalies are. He will then report. We then have, that takes about a week and a half, normally week and a half, 2 weeks. And then we then have a meeting with Joe's commercial team to go through those pointers, if you like. And then we send back the amendments and the corrections to Echelon. At that point, once they understand the finer workings of it, then they issue a final draft. So what you're seeing, if you're looking at that raw data, you're seeing the data. You're not seeing the full picture. You're not seeing the photographic evidence. One of the things that we insisted on in this contract is lots and lots of photographs to show works completed.
Thank you, Peter. And I do appreciate, there's a process that doesn't come across, perhaps, it'd be good to see eventually if we can provide the receipts, or we have provided the receipts that Echelon requested, if any costs has been recovered. So just before I move on, I just want to ask, why do you think the former Deputy Chief Executive suddenly decided to take umbrage with Echelon in 2023?
I don't think they did take umbrage. We had a lady working here at the council who was kind of a project manager, lead. Do you want her name? Shall I give you her name? Her name was Alison Sadiq, and she came and joined the council on a fixed-term contract, and her role was as a project manager type project lead, and they started to use Ali Sadiq as basically in that role, and they didn't feel that. So they were never, Echelon were never dumped, so they were never pulled off the contract. They carried on with the partner and advisor role, and they carried on with the cost consultancy role. They just weren't invited to the strategic core group or the operational core groups, as they once had been.
Thank you. So let me just get this straight. 2023, all right, the year starts before the new financial year with Morgan Sindall profit down in the doldrums, right? And then when April the 1st, 2023 happens, Echelon suddenly aren't invited to the meetings anymore. Someone else comes in to mark our own homework, it seems, right? And then KPIs are downgraded. Service falls to record worst services. But we've been told in 2025, we need to get Echelon back on board, and that's going to help the contract. Does anyone think 2023 and the decisions to remove echelon and downgrade the KPIs might have been a mistake?
Honestly, no. I think echelon, I think it's probably a cost-saving thing. I don't want to put words in former colleagues' mouths, but the feeling now is because we don't have that much history, apart from Pete and Nick, on the contract, it would be good to have someone who was there from the beginning to help us moving forward. And then with the increased sort of burden of regulation that's coming in from all the regulators, having an expert in the room at all times, it just seems good governance from my point of view. So that's really where our decision has arrived at.
Okay, so we remove the independent moderator. I will move on from this for everyone's benefit. Remove the independent moderator, the architect of the contract itself, the arbiter, the safeguard of the contract, yeah? The one who led a number of workshops in 2019, you know, getting Basildon Borough Council and Morgan Sindall staff together to bond, to talk about what their favourite crisp flavours were. Yes, I did read that workshop report. But also with targets for the former Deputy Chief Exec and the former Director of Housing and Property to put together a planned works programme by the 14th of June 2019. Okay. You're telling me now that we have one. My impression is that one was never put in place and followed up on. That's the impression I got from the report. Okay. And then we decide to take echelon away and we put in a woman who was the chief exec's head of office at the time, yeah, to mark the homework and the performance of the contract. Okay. So that is accountability, that's transparency. And just to say, it all kind of coincides with Morgan Sindall's miraculous financial recovery. And I just want to ask Morgan Sindall if you could, you know, see it from members' point of view that this could be perceived as a little bit fishy.
I mean, I certainly don't see that at all. I think that the COVID years were heavily impacted for organisations carrying out repairs and maintenance, but also planned maintenance works as well. And you know, at the beginning of the contract, planned maintenance works were carried out in smaller scale, and more planned works were carried out in 22, 23, 23, 24. So that's what feeds into the efficiency of the team and the improvement. And I wouldn't say it's a miraculous improvement. It's still below the levels that were tendered under the contract.
It's below the levels that were tendered under the contract, but against the economic situation in the UK at that time, it is pretty miraculous, I would say. Joe, how much were you paid by Basildon Council during lockdown when 80% of your staff were on furlough and most repairs were paused?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information. I can certainly provide that to the committee afterwards, but that's not something that that was obviously included in the report or requested prior to the meeting.
Would a member of the strategic core group know this answer?
In line with the public procurement notification 2202, we were asked by the government to make relief payments to contractors to make sure that we had a contractor that came out the other end of COVID, because at that point no one knew how long the COVID situation was going to last. We were forced by government guidelines at the time to reduce repair service down to emergencies only, and we were asked to stop all planned works, all unnecessary works, only safety works. We managed to continue with just outside work, so anything exterior to the property where we weren't in contact with the tenant, we managed to keep going for a while. In total, those relief payments came to about £4.5 million, and that money was paid back by Morgan Sindall over a period of time, paid back to the council.
Thank you, Peter. From Echelon's reports, it seems that in the COVID-affected year, they made, the money going into the coffers at Morgan Sindall from Basildon Council was about 25 million, which is a bit less than what they would normally get. You know, the price per property and everything is usually brings it up to about 35 mil. But it looks like on the echelon reports that they got the full amount of the contract payment that year.
The PPP payments and other regular monthly payments to Morgan Sindall continued. So the £4.5 million at the time we were advised to make those payments based on the amount, I think on the amount of monies that Morgan Sindall would be, there would be a shortfall on their planned works. And on just mentioning planned works programs, we have a planned works program every year and have had since I joined the council in 2022. So there is a planned capital works program every year. It's gone through different connotations, it's gone through different names, but we've had planned works every year, long before Morgan Sindall.
Well, first of all, how is it then that a lack of a planned works programme impacted Morgan Sindall's profit by 1.6 million one year?
Might have had a planned works programme, but during those years there was significant reduction of planned works being carried out because of access to properties and residents actually wanting individuals to be within their properties outside of emergency repairs and compliancy issues.
I do think, for the interest of transparency for this scrutiny committee, we should have known that there was a planned works programme which impacted Morgan Sindall that was in another work stream. You know, even if it doesn't all connect, you know, it looks like from the reports that this absence of a planned works programme, so a long-term plan of how we're going to do big repairs to our ageing housing stock, that isn't forthcoming, and that's impacted Morgan Sindall's profitability on the contract.
If I can just make myself clear, Chair, on the planned works programs. Every year we have a planned works program. The planned works program was severely impacted during the COVID period. I wasn't saying that we had a program that year that was unaffected. It was severely affected in those COVID lockdown periods.
Okay, so I think we're going around in circles, and that, you know, we've got a planned works programme that's not part of this Morgan Sindall contract, even though they have to repair the same houses. Confusing, but I just think that, just to recap on this bit, so we've got to a point where echelon are removed, we've got all these anomalies coming through on these audit reports, blaming the absence of a planned works programme in one of the reports, but now we're hearing that there is one, but, you know, that wasn't the reason why you lost 1.6 million. And we've got, echelon out the party. We've got a woman who was the right-hand woman of the CEO and deputy CEO acting as independent safeguard for the contract. You know, we've got questions over whether the leader of the council back then and the cabinet member for housing knew about these decisions. And I just want to say I'm extremely vexed and confused by what echelon are saying, and, you know, the clarity that they're providing and the kind of lack of clarity that we get in here, you know, information that we weren't privy to, semantics, things that, you know, I'm being corrected on when I'm going from the report that I've received. Okay. The report also proposes lowering the minimum level of acceptable performance on tenant satisfaction to 80% and diluting the emergency repair target. How does reducing expectations improve outcomes?
So, as mentioned, the sheer amount of emergencies coming through has changed significantly over the term of the contract. We always had a very, very punchy 2-hour window, and now legislation is coming in telling us we need to do it within 24 hours. So we were just going to follow the legislation set out by central government. That's the reason we're changing it.
Okay, So we're now going to respond to emergency repairs in 24 hours. When it looks like, from the report, and I stand to be corrected, that some have been lumped in with routine repairs and residents are waiting up to 28 days. When we did a performance scrutiny committee on the rant and rave data back in September, it definitely showed that although emergency repairs should have been attended to within a 2 or 24-hour window, that some people waiting up to a week, 2 weeks in some cases. Now you're saying that legislation's coming in, which says that the council and Morgan Sindall have to respond to these emergency repairs within 24 hours. The contract, the KPIs that we've heard say, there's even a line in the report which says that this contract currently doesn't have the capacity to attend to the full volume of emergency repairs in 2024, 2025, 2026. So when this legislation comes in, how many times are we planning to break the law?
The original operating model was set up to attend to 10% of emergency call-outs, and obviously, as we've explained, post-COVID, those emergency call-outs have increased significantly, up to a kind of constant position of 25%. So it's looking at, what we're saying is, we either look at the KPI for that, or we have to update the operating model to make sure that we can deal with 30% of emergencies within 2 hours. But that would mean additional resources on the contract, because it is a change in the requirements under the contract and the level of emergencies coming through. We have to, when you tender, you're tendering on an operating model that's based on the relevant information that you have at that time. You have to also allow the partnership to respond to a changing environment.
Thank you, Jo. And I do say that members are aware from the report that this is a flexible contract, and that was how it was designed. So every single year, when Echelon deliver their reports, they make recommendations which can be taken on board or not by the strategic core group. Now, the red flags are that a lot of these recommendations continue from year 1 to year 8 in the reports. Okay. And with that, I'm going to bring in Councillor Kerry Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's rather interesting. It goes back to where I want to start, where we spoke about earlier about the former leader and the former cabinet member for housing not being told or knowing something. But we don't know, and they will make their position clear in due course. But this item on the agenda, I have monthly briefings with my housing team as the cabinet member. This has never, ever been put to me about watering down. I'm the cabinet member. You're just here to scrutinise me. Is this the way we need to move forward, or should we be saying, hold on, until it's been through the cabinet member and the cabinet member's thrashed that out, then why are we proceeding with this? It should be me, sign off, you guys say yes or no, and I act upon your will. Now, I've had a lovely day in the garden. I could have thought, oh, you know, you guys are all fine. You'll do a good job of scrutinising them. But if I'd not been here today, never know about this watering down. And I don't say that to criticise, but we've had one mistake. Do we want to repeat that? And I don't think this decision of watering down of anything until it has been to me, to have my discussion with my housing team, and then come back here. We put the horse before the cart and not the other way around.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Can I just ask, can you make a commitment that the KPIs be revised back up to original standards in the absence of member scrutiny?
Absolutely, and it's been very interesting to watch your work tonight. We got told that Cabinet, the reversal of Cabinet from committee to Cabinet would make prompt and speedier decisions. And I'm not criticising any member, but it seems like officers thought, let's not bother the member. Almost a Humphrey Appleby-esque. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but I think everything we do needs to come to us. And I'm so worried about emergency repairs. This wasn't one of our tenants, this was a housing association tenant. I'm out in Lee Chapel South leafleting one winter's day around Christmas. This little old dear goes at the window like that. I thought, what's all that about? I went, you okay? She went, I'm cold. Well, put the heating on. They won't fix it. They've got to wait for a part for a boiler. Understand that. Have they given you temporary heaters? No. So I said, get in the kitchen. I had a friend with me. I said to my friend, get that old lady in the kitchen, get that oven on, leave the door open, keep it warm. So Family Housing Association's press department number, and I spoke to them. So if that's what slips through with a housing association, if we water down our emergency repairs, are we going to have tenants? Because look, it's not Morgan Sindall's fault if a boiler part is not available on the shelf for whatever reason. It's not their fault. These suppliers do this thing called just in time. I understand that, I get that. But if we water down our emergency repairs, are we going to have old dears in Basildon A&E or somewhere, you know, permanent, because we've watered down this emergency repair? Now, I know our staff wouldn't do that, but I think that discussion needs to be had with me and my team, so I can see get those safeguards before you guys scrutinise it and make a recommendation. That's the right way of doing business.
I'll bring you in, Peter, but I just want to say, you know, we're all councillors here tonight. I've got the Community Engagement Scrutiny Committee with me. We're councillors of different stripes, yeah? We don't all get along famously, but I think what we can agree with on is that we're all democratically elected to represent the wants and needs and feelings of the residents, yeah? And I think that it's astounding that officers would override members in making a decision that affects 12,500 households, 5,500 garages, and hundreds and thousands of tenants. Yeah, I think that these decisions been made overriding democratically elected members. Evidence that, you know, this was operating as an officer-led council in 2023, it seems. Yeah, and I'm going to write to Councillors Baggett and Schrader to just make sure that they had no oversight over this, but I don't think any councillor in their right mind would agree to the lowering of KPIs around your social housing management and repair system. Absolutely not. And with that, I will bring in Peter.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just clarify, there's absolutely no intention at all to water down repairs, emergency repairs. That's not the intention at all. So when this KPI was first put into place at the start of this contract, because we're Basildon and we're not a London borough, it was seen by us that you could be from one side of this district to the other quite comfortably within half an hour, 3/4 of an hour. So the KPI was put in place for emergencies to attend the emergency within 2 hours, not to complete the order within 2 hours, to attend within 2 hours, and we felt that was the right thing to do at the time. The 28-day routine repair is to complete within 28 days, not to attend, so they're measured very differently. With the introduction of Awab's law, which comes into force proper in October, and will bring in all 29 elements of the HHSRS Health and Safety Rating System for properties, they are bringing in legislation to complete an emergency works order within 24 hours. So our view is that we should abide by the legislation, and we should measure an emergency to complete within 24 hours and a routine repair to complete within 28 days, so that they're both measured the same. And that's not in any way to water down an emergency repair. That's to bring ourselves in line with legislation, and we measure both KPIs using the same rationale.
I understand there's a lot of conversation about these laws coming in 2025, but there are already regulatory standards and minimum standards around legislation of how quickly contractors should respond to emergency and hazardous repairs. Yeah, and that is something that we're putting people's lives in danger, right? Not getting to them within a 2-hour, 24-hour period. Somebody with an electrical fault, somebody with a huge faucet leak, some black mould. I've heard a lot about that through my councillor inbox. So I just want to, we've touched on comms, and, the report says that Morgan Sindall are left to have difficult conversations with residents about landlord decisions they aren't privy to, and that's part of the conflict that's arising. So again, Morgan Sindall are going out and doing our public relations as a council, which is, I can't imagine, would be very positive in a lot of ways. I mean, I stand to be corrected. I'd love to hear the great things that Morgan Sindall say about us at subcontractor level. So, look, given the levels of ongoing performance issues, the significant cost to the council, including high levels of spend on jobs that are excluded from the core contract and never put back in, even though it's a flexible working arrangement and we can add in work streams and take them away as we please. Sorry, the strategic core group could do that, but not Echelon, they're not invited. And the fact that key KPIs have been lowered, right, by up to 10% after years of underperformance. Does Morgan Sindall and Basildon Council, do you actually want to stay in this contract, both of you?
So can I just take a number of points there? When we go and talk to residents directly, we speak respectfully about our partnership with Basildon Council, and when we are communicating to residents maybe that have had a survey that show that 2 cabinets of a kitchen will be replaced because that's what is required under the contract and not a full kitchen replacement. Sometimes that's a difficult conversation because they want a full kitchen replacement, but actually the standard of the units that are there are absolutely adequate and they're not due for renewal until maybe 2027 or 2028 or beyond that. So when we're saying about we're having conversations there, that is related slightly to housing management staff not always having the presence post-COVID to go and speak directly with residents of some of these things. So yes, some of our staff are left to have some of those conversations, but we talk about that as a partnership and address that because it's a hard conversation when somebody's expecting a full repair and we're going and we're delivering that message ourselves. So that's the example that's used in the paper there, and that happens quite often. And I know that Christine's spoken with the housing management team to get more presence on the ground and actually housing management staff back visiting these residents, because sometimes the only people that they have spoken to is ourselves that are going into the properties. So, you know, and I think that will only be beneficial to those conversations and managing that.
Thank you, Jo. And obviously, do understand where you're coming from there, but I do know that Morgan Sindall subcontracts, you know, a large amount of its work, and I'd be interested to know, you know, what kind of oversight, you know, you have on all your subcontractors. How do they report back to you about conversations they're having? Is there raw data there that we could look at, you know, to kind of show that what you're saying is right, that all our subcontractors, and we'll see from the rant and rave data, which we haven't even touched on today, that there are varying levels of service. Most people are polite, kind, respectful. We get that. Some people walk straight out of someone's house and throw all their construction waste in the hedge outside their house. We saw that. Okay, we've got various levels of performance with the subcontracting group. So we need a reassurance that these conversations they are having about the council are positive and respectful. And I just want to ask, like, why has it taken 7 months to hire a comms officer, you know, for this role? It's a great challenge, you know. It looks like this council's been going with this contract since 2016. It's now 2025. Someone's finally put 50p in Basildon Council a year before the contract is due to end. Could be extended by an extra 5 years, depending on performance. Wondering why now we're getting our comms officer, we're getting our data in order, we're going to start making decisions strategically using data. I don't know what we were doing before. I know that 3 years of surveys from residents were done on paper before 2019, before Rant and Rave came in. They're nowhere to be seen. Okay, so it just paints a picture, and I just would say, doesn't this suggest a relationship where the council is more focused on making the contract look functional, I would say this evening, than holding it to account? And in that context, what's really in it for Morgan Sindall, aside from a client that's willing to mark your homework?
I think just coming back to the communication officer, this was actually a request from the leader of the council to bring a communications officer into the framework. And help the profile of the framework, and also, you know, the communication with the ward committee panels, etc., to make sure that we had visibility there and that we could speak more directly to local councillors as well as residents, because it was very much seen as a missing that we had the dialogue with residents and that we've got a high level of complaints coming through local councillors, and we needed that dialogue there as well that was missing. So it wasn't something that was proposed by Morgan Sindall, it was actually proposed by the leader of the council.
Well, I would say that's a genius recommendation. I'm sure he would agree with himself.
And so on all that point as well is the fact that there was some lag time in the borough council agreeing the job description for that post as well. So there was a lag in terms of getting that together. So that was the timeliness of that post going forward was partly the responsibility of the local authority and not the responsibility of Morgan Sindall.
I know. And again, we need an asset management hire as well. So that's something that hasn't been done up till now. Somebody to grip it.
If you go through the echelon reports, and also if you go through some of the audit reports relating to the asset management team, right back to about 2018, there is a clear requirement for an asset management system to be brought in. That has not been brought in. We're finally getting to a situation where we're looking at a proper scope to get one in, and that's alongside a housing management system as well. So we have been without a good data set as a landlord for a long time, and it's been dealt with now. From our perspective, the 360 view as a landlord of both sides, as our tenant and also our asset, is really important to the council. And taking us forward in through LGR, it's going to be even more important that we actually know who we've got in the borough and what our housing stock looks like. And I think John's been, as long as he's been an advocate of getting that in place. And it's only in the last 6 months that we're getting to a situation where we know exactly what we want and the scope of what we want. So we've been working very hard on that.
Thank you. Yeah, there's been a lot of changes in the council over the past year, over the last 6 months. Got a new chief executive who, I don't know if he'll be invited to the strategic core group or not, but play your cards right. And Echelon will be back, if the recommendations go through. So, yeah, let's see where we are then. Any questions from the floor before we wrap up, Councillor Kerry Smith?
I think moving forward, it might be an idea, it's said with respect and fullness to this committee, that an extra recommendation is added. So any changes to the contract between the council and Morgan Sindall, that the cabinet member for housing and not the cabinet member who holds the finance brief is given an update and a CMDR is issued, which is publicised in the bulletin. Then that way we know exactly who is responsible and who is accountable. And moving forward, unfortunately, you've mentioned 2 councillors who are not here tonight to put their side across. So what's done is done, but moving forward, so like these proposals being changed and amended, they have to tell the councillor who's responsible for the money and the councillor who's responsible for the housing. We both issue a CMDR according to who's more responsible for that item. That goes in the bulletin, that is sent to all members, and the bulletin is accessible from the council website to any member of the public. Thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Callaghan, can I? This is the whole idea of the Housing Improvement Board. The Housing Improvement Board is a board that's not just made up of officers, it's made up of elected members, it's also made up of tenants, and that's really important for the board to be effective. So, and that's why the indication that I said to you earlier, it goes to all the operational boards, strategic, it will then go up to the fully operational Housing Improvement Board. That will then have oversight by the chief exec, and any recommendations that will go on to cabinet. And Councillor Smith is part of the Housing Improvement Board, so Councillor Smith will get views, and the minutes of the Housing Improvement Board are published anyway. So there is a way already within the new mechanism of the Housing Improvement Board for Councillor Smith to have an oversight of any recommendations that would come through that, and that would be the way that I would suggest that we deal with it. Because that would then have a clear outing in front of tenants as well, which is as important as being seen by just elected members. And the tenants, we're looking at a panel of about 10 residents on that, so it will have a clear oversight by both sides of the political and also from residents.
Thank you for that clarification, Christine. I just want to bring in Councillor Val Robbins, the chair of the Community Engagement Scrutiny Committee.
Thanks. Aside from what you said this evening, the problems that I brought up earlier with regard to various residents that I've experienced, these works have to have someone who is in a proper job and capable of passing the repairs before the bill is paid, because the standard of the repairs that I've experienced in 2 of the properties is not acceptable. And I cannot believe the money that's been paid for the repairs. Now, the person who was in charge of one particular property, the repairs, even I told him, that's disgusting. And it was stupid little things like the painting line, the rubbing down, the door handle, the outlet pipe on the washing machine going up instead of down. You know, you can sit here and take this presentation, but when you look at it in real life, we've got to have a standard. And that is what I was trying to say earlier. And I don't want to go on any individual case. I just want to say, overall, any repairs before they're passed should be inspected. If you build a house, each level of your build, you've got to have the building inspector down to pass it. It's the same thing. That's all I've got to say.
Councillor Terry Sargent.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I've made lots of notes and I'm quite confused at the minute because I didn't expect that we would receive a paper yesterday that was 365 pages long and be expected to, and it looks like it's the echelon report. And realistically, that should have been, you know, you spoke yourself about going through it over the weekend. Well, I just skimmed it this evening, not realising what was in the report, but asking, not just about that, but seeking some response from officers and Morgan Sindall, which I will ask if I may, Chairman. Peter and Joe, are you aware of the echelon report?
I'm aware of the echelon reports that have been involved in the business for 12 months now, so I haven't been in receipt of one. Apologies. I am aware of the echelon reports, but I haven't reviewed the reports for the preceding years when I wasn't at the business, and no items have been raised that have been indicated as not resolved from those reports in my period of time here.
What about yourself, Peter?
Every year, Councillor, every year we receive the report from Echelon, and as I say, it used to come when I was repairs service manager. It used to come to me, and then when I stepped... Sorry? So yeah, every year I receive the open book review, and then as I say, Nick would now spend a week or 2 going through that with his team, pulling all the information out that Echelon have highlighted. And Echelon highlights samples. They take samples from the raw data, and then what they do is they pull them out, and then Nick would go through that. And it may be that something has been agreed locally. It may be that something has, one of the surveyors has got some inside knowledge on what happened at the property, but we then go through each individual case in those sampling, and then it goes back to Morgan Sindall, and we then all sit in a room, or they would sit in a room and go through it with Morgan Sindall's commercial team, and then it goes back to Echelon for the final draft. The final draft would then be distributed to the relevant parties, so to the executive directors and councillor.
Is this the final? Well, it is. It's saying it's the final draft. And are you in agreement with the report? The findings, yes.
I'm in agreement with their findings.
Oh, sorry, I need to intervene here. Okay, I believe that we need to wrap up this section. I think that Councillor Terry Sargent, you asked a good question. So I'm just going to let Peter Long ask, finalise his question about whether he's in agreement with the report. And then I think that we need to take a 10-minute comfort break before the next item, if that's okay. And obviously all of these comments will be recorded, and any follow-up you have, Councillor Sargent, will be relayed via the minutes of this meeting.
Can I just say something in response to that, Chairman? We've been here since 7 o'clock this evening and it's nearly 9 o'clock. This is the only opportunity that I've had all evening to listen to the Morgan Sindall give their report, to the officers to respond and also give their report. Most of it has been taken up by yourself, and I totally understand that because you've had a lot of information that you've been able to digest.
Councillor Sargent, I'm very sorry. I have to shut you down. The
but
fact is that you aren't a member of the Performance Scrutiny Committee. You did not read the report. That's why, as a chair's prerogative, I went through a line by line of the notes I made. I understand that you come into this information fresh. It's interesting. There's more to discuss, but I don't think we should do it now before 9 o'clock. So thank you.
You're not quite correct, Chairman, but you are the Chairman, and I don't feel we were given enough time to read the report, and we also haven't had any time whatsoever to give our comments. But you are the Chairman, so I take notice. Thank you.
Thank you. Final question for Peter before we go. Are you in agreement with the report that was delivered tonight?
Yes, I am, Chair, at that point in the proceedings. So I'm in agreement with Echelon's report. We would then do some investigative works and we would then respond. We would then... Are you talking about the final? Sorry, the final draft? Yes, I am. And if I may just add, I'm happy to take questions from Councillor Sargent outside of this meeting if it helps.
Okay, thank you everyone for your time. We're going to take a short comfort break. I'm going to say 5 minutes, 9 o'clock, reconvene for the next item. Thank you. Just to say the comfort break is now over. Hope it was helpful. Yes, so the next part of the agenda, we're hearing from our partners at the Basildon and Brentwood Alliance, Health and Wellbeing Alliance. They are an integrated care board overseen by NHS England, more or less, loosely. So we actually have a GP with us tonight, and we've taken up a lot of his valuable time, but we are going to hear from you, Dr. Basu, and we're going to hear from Pam Green, who is the current chair of the Basildon and Brentwood Health and Wellbeing Alliance. So over to you guys.
Am I on that one? Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting us to be here on your scrutiny this evening. I'm Pam Green, Alliance Director for Basildon and Brentwood. That's the geographical configuration of the current NHS boundaries of Integrated Care Board. I'm also the Executive Director for Primary Care, which includes dentistry, optometry, pharmacy and general practice medicine. So your family GP, of which we have our esteemed colleague Dr. Basu with us, who works in Central Basildon and is part of the team that looks after night surgery, which of course we've worked in great partnership to get onto the Basildon Sporting Village site, which is a real win for the local population. I'll quickly canter through our alliance arrangement and what it is, and then I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Basu to talk through his country-leading, if not wider, work that's happening right here in Basildon now, which comes very much in line with the new government directives around neighbourhood health. And the only reference I will make to housing will come shortly in my presentation, but we talk a lot about the wider determinants of health. So whilst it's a tentative link, actually housing is a very important part of health and the health of our population, and particularly those that are residents for the council. So we have a very wide partnership, and this is the logo that currently represents us. So we're working together as statutory voluntary sector organisations for the better health of the local population. This is just a quick canter through the organisations that work with us in this collaboration and partnership. And it's a collaboration of the willing. The Integrated Care Board has, as commissioners, has a statutory function around integration for the betterment of the health and well-being of the resident. And you can see that our convening factor brings multiple organisations together, not just health, and that really reflects the wider determinants of health. The Integrated Care Board, as I said, covers not just our population here in Basildon and Brentwood, but the population of Mid and South Essex. So it's a pretty big geography, so 1.2 million residents that cover that geography. And with the most recent plans from the current government, actually that stands to get bigger. But what's important for the resident is that the place that they recognise and the place that they live is actually where we should be aggregating services. So primary care networks, which Dr. Basu will talk on behalf of, represents a community of 40 to 50,000 population, and it's at the level we can have the greatest impact with your housing officers, with the voluntary sector, with the community agents, with work that we have done through charities like Achieve, Thrive and Flourish that support our young people, families that have experienced domestic violence, schools, to make better lifestyle changes and help us with that prevention agenda. So we have alongside the Integrated Care Board an Integrated Care Partnership, which of course Basildon Council is part of, and we have elected member representation in that as well. And it is a real privilege that Emma, Councillor Callaghan, is actually part of our Health and Wellbeing Alliance, and we look forward to you coming back to our meetings when you return from your very joyous, I'm sure, maternity leave, if not a little exhausting. So this is the current setup, And as we await guidance for those, the statutory changes that will come forward from the most recent health announcements, whilst we work with NHS England, we aren't NHS England, so you will see some changes of the configuration, oversight, scrutiny and assurance functions of integrated care boards, but that information is yet to be defined. It has been announced that integrated care boards will be significantly smaller, broadly across the country, totalling a 50% reduction. And I think that's why the alliance is so significant now, because actually it's not just about health taking forward this wider work, it's about how all partners can work together for the well-being of the population. Just bear with me a second. So since 2012, there has been a significant attempt to develop integrated neighbourhood working. And I think the conditions are absolutely right now with the most recent announcements around neighbourhood health and the three very significant strategic shifts that have been highlighted since Lord Darcy did his review. So moving from hospital services to community services wherever possible. Our hospitals are experiencing significant demand, as are our GPs, and we'll talk about that shortly, about the sorts of volumes of attendances that we see in primary care and avoidance of admissions and the great work that they do. Moving from treatment to prevention, so a very strong prevention agenda, and we all have a role in prevention, whether that be good quality housing, whether that be physical activity and the lived environment, green space, active travel, or primary or secondary detection of things like blood pressure. You know, these all comprise of our prevention challenge between us. And also moving from analogue services to digital services, we see significant benefits in being able to communicate with some groups around using the NHS app and different platforms. Now, I'm not saying that's convenient for everybody, but actually if we can, those that are willing to use those sorts of, and again, Dr. Basu will talk about this, those groups that are willing to use digital interfaces that are much more efficient mean that then those that can't actually get a better experience when they use telephone-based support services. So it's about having a whole range of service offers because remembering our 25% of our population are actually children up to the age of 18. So the way all of us in the room here choose to interface with our health services, it's very, very different if you're a young person now. And actually speaking through telephones is not a thing that the current generation under the age of 18 do. They like to interface with, and up to the age of 25, even up to the age of 40, they do a lot of their interfacing through digital platforms. And we have to adapt to those sorts of ways of working. So conditions are right now for us working together in a very, very different way. This demonstrates why we all work together in an alliance. So this is a piece of research done in American University, Wisconsin, and it's called the Robert Wood Johnson, after Professor Robert Wood Johnson that did this piece of research, that actually determines that only 20% of anyone's health is determined by the services that we commission and deliver. Actually, the health of our population is determined by all of those other 80% of things. So socioeconomic factors, so, you know, we know that household income significantly affects whether you can make healthy life choices or not, and access to other things around physical activity, etc. All of those things are there's a significant impact in your household income on those choices. The physical environment has a massive impact on people's life, the stresses of their life. And again, we'll talk about it later, but a 30% plus of what comes into a GP practice is not medical in origin. It can be about stresses of lost work, stresses of the environment that they live in, fear, living under fear, for antisocial behaviour. All of those things drive our residents towards their GP, and that comprises 30 to 40% of the workload on a daily basis. Health behaviours, and of course we can manage those, we can influence those if we have the right sort of communication and relationship and trust with our residents, and actually putting the effort in to stop smoking, and again the great work that we've done with the council over years around physical activity, active travel, have a real impact on our residents' health and well-being, their weight, their blood pressure, all of those sorts of things. And then it comes back to that 20% that we commission, and that has to work well. And we're not saying that doesn't need to work well; it absolutely does. But we're more of an illness service rather than a wellness service, and actually we want to move to being a wellness service and take that demand out, and so that those that need emergency care can get it in a more swift time. To coin a phrase, the causes of ill health are listed on the site. So what we're trying to do is actually work in the causes of ill health as opposed to trying to treat the consequences. Now, of course, there will be a population that is experiencing the consequences, and we have to double run our services. But if we can work together on housing, poverty, education, social cohesion, reduction of isolation and economic activity, we have a real chance of stemming the demand that we see in all of our services. And that's all of our services, not just health, but equally the council services as well. This is just to demonstrate that we have an all-age strategy across the Alliance that goes from cradle to grave, start well to die well, and all of those presentations in between, so that we can start to work on a population health-based management approach. Very quickly, the Alliance in Basildon and Brentwood is very young in comparison to other parts of Essex. It's only had this partnership since October 2022. And certainly in other parts of Essex, they're up to 10 years old now. And what I should have said is that I'm a clinician, I'm a physiotherapist. I've worked predominantly in my clinical career as a stroke physiotherapist, and have worked all over Essex. And actually, these sorts of collaborations really change the way our workforce feels valued, and can add value to our local residents. So it's important that we have distributed leadership across our relative organisations, coming together to use our resources wisely. We build on something which I'm going to go to Dr. Basu now about integrated neighbourhood teams, which is that prevention and reduction of ill health on our population. And we stabilise our very valuable primary care services for the next generation, because we are privileged to have such great medical provision in primary care, and many countries don't have that sort of model. And actually, can you imagine the scenario if we didn't have that sort of early identification and prevention of ill health within our population? Our GP practices provide an absolutely pivotal role in the care and health of our population. So I am going to switch to another presentation now. Just bear with me for a moment while I stop sharing that one, and I will share Dr. Basu's slides, so then we can have a conversation about the new phase of general practice. So, has that come through? Yeah. Thank you. So, Dr. Basu, I'll hand over to you, and you just tell me which slide you want.
Thank you for allowing me to present this work that we have been doing for around 2 years. It's a model that I wanted to show, which can be replicated in defined places, and that's why I'm very excited to present this. So if you see, it's Central Basildon PCN, which is our PCN, and how we did work with the integrated neighborhood team. Now, PCN word normally scares people because it's penalty charge notice, but it is not. It's a primary care network, and it evolved over the last few years, and it has done some work that a GP surgery could not have done. So that's what I will present as well. So if you look at it, it's central, Basildon, PCN. And if you look at our motto at the bottom, it's improving lives together. This togetherness, the working together of the surgeries with other services, that's what I want to talk about. So our PCN, the primary care network, has these 9 surgeries. Some of you may know of 1 or 2 of them, or maybe patient, but this is what it is. It's mostly in Pitsea and Langdon Hills and this area. This is the picture of the ICB, where we are Basildon, and you can see there are 6 primary care networks, and we are one of them. Now this population, this is very important. The data is very important in planning anything. So this is available easily, but we rarely use it. If you look at the population of the Mid and South Essex ICB, it's 1.3 million. And then if you look at Basildon, Brentwood, Thurrock, a population, it shows is 500,000 population. And our PCN population is around 54,000, so nearly 1/10 of it. Now we looked at emergency hospital attendances from Basildon, Brentwood area. So 100,000 people have attended over 1 year. This was the year of 2022-2023, and they had taken up 160,000 appointments. Now in emergency A&E, if there is any higher attendance, it becomes news, and we are all aware that, oh, A&E is loaded, so there is black out, and they say should not be sending patients should not go, with only this number of appointments. But if you look at the same period, the number of appointments that the primary care gave for the patients is 2.5 million. So it's a huge number, but we are never in the news. Look at the A&E attendances from our PCN. It's only 21,000, but how many appointments we gave to our patients? 250,000. So there's a huge number of appointments that we provide to our patients, but it remains under the radar. So there is this increasing demand, and the GP's numbers have been reducing all over, and it's been in the news. During this period, this was around 2019, 2020, the good thing happened is the ICB was formed, the CCGs were dissolved, and PCN and the ARR scheme started. PCN, as I mentioned, is primary care network. So our PCN had 9 practices, and we started around 50,000 population. And the ARR scheme was the first time that the primary care had some money to employ other services, so other people who could help the GP surgeries, like the pharmacist, physiotherapist, physician associates, GP assistants. So this was a bit of ring fence that you can only employ these type of people, and the money was there. With this background, in the summer of 2022, Pam and Simon, who is a deputy, came for a meeting with me. Now, any high official, if they want to come and have a meeting with you, you are very scared. So something is going to go wrong. So I was very skeptical about this meeting. Why do you want to come to see me, of all the people? But when they came and talked to me about this paper. Now, this is a paper which was written by Dr. Claire Fuller. It's a stock take report. Now, I don't know about your area, but in NHS, lot of papers, lot of people write, and none of us read about it, unless it is important. So I had never heard about this, but they impressed me, and I did read about this paper. It's only 30 pages, and the main thing it said was integrating the primary care with the other services. So we agreed that we will start the process, and before that, for the planning, we looked at our population again. So the long-term conditions that we had in our area, this is what it shows. But if you look at the population in our PCN area, after obesity, it's depression. And if we look at it a bit more carefully, is depression and anxiety is quite high. So we thought maybe the mental health is one of the main problems in our population. So we deep dive into 3 surgeries, which is a combined population of 10,000, which is 1/5 of our PCN. And we looked at 1 week of September 2022. If we looked at the reasons why people were attending the surgery, and there were
1,500.
Around 1,500 appointments. But if you look at carefully, there's a pattern that quite a few is of similar type. And it's 146 appointments, which is the maximum after medication reviews, were patients with mental health problems. Then we looked at frequent attenders in accident emergency who are attending more than 10 times. So these are the reasons for it. But if you look at it again, the population, it looks like it is again mental health issues that's causing the main reason people are attending from our PCN, which is 37. So highest number of attendance for GP surgery is mental health, A&E is mental health. So we looked at number of people who were attending more than 10 times in our GP surgery. There were around 2,000 people, and we found that most of them were between 15 and 45 years age, that is young adults, with mental health issues, around 52%. So we tried and find out why they were attending, what was the issue. And the main issue is at the bottom line, which is social, financial, economic, or physical health. So mainly not mental health, but they were presenting with mental health issues. So this was the main reason that we started planning our work. So we created our integrated neighborhood team with a manager, and we were very lucky to have a care coordinator and very lucky to have the digital person who could work with us. The definition of this INT is seamless integration of the care system across different organizations, and that was the aim that we wanted to achieve. So we had a algorithm of how we are going to do this. We had quite a few meetings. The main thing is we kept it very simple for the care coordinator when they approach the patients. Simple words that how can I help? And there was no medical personnel or medical terminology in the discussions. So we spent some time, so roughly around 3 months initially, for the care coordinator to go to the different services and understand how they work, how he should be able to refer these patients to these services smoothly. And if you look at this, there's a huge number of services that he identified, which I was not aware of. And it looks, if you see this chart, there is around 60 different voluntary services who were willing to take these patients and help them. We did some training with our staff so that the receptionists are able to identify the patients and then refer on to these care coordinators to this project. So we didn't depend on the GPs only. And they had a very simple referral protocol, and the referral process was also very simple. This is an example. Just the saying is the patient is struggling. We did 1 year, and it was around 1,000 patients that we approached, and we had tried and helped them. And this is the different services that we referred. This is the showing. It's around 52 different services that these care coordinators referred on to different the patients. This is interesting because if it was me as a GP, I would never have been able to do this because I would not know about all these services. But because we had this care coordinator who had spent time and understood all the services, he was able to do this. And the result was, so this is a number of patients who are attending more than 25 times the GP surgery. And you can see the number of attendances came down. Their any attendances also reduced. And the any attendance of the 30 highest numbers were halved, and it has continued to come down. So we tapped into these 60 services. We improved the patients' lives, reduced the A&E attendance and GP surgery attendance. This did not mean that the surgery appointments were empty. It just meant those people who are suffering and repeatedly attending the surgeries, they did not need to come to the surgeries anymore. Their problems were resolved, or they were in the process of being resolved. So they were not stressed. So their lives definitely improved. So future planning. We've identified the A&E attendance were reduced by our process. And if we use the same model in different PCNs, the different parts of the country, and identify the patients who are attending more than 10 times, here the number is around 400. And we help them, if we even achieve 50% of the target, it will reduce the attendances a lot and also save around 300,000 for this place. So it's a simple project, no extra funding because government had given us the funding for the ARRs. And the patients benefited from the services which were existing but unknown to the GP surgeries. So this is the main advantage of this project. I just want to say something more about the PCN, how it has helped compared to if it was just a GP surgery. So PCN is a combination of 9 surgeries for our PCN. LD patients, learning difficulty patients, they have higher incidence of mortality and morbidity. Every surgery has few of them, and they are not a main number of patients, so they become slightly neglected. As a PCN, we decided we are going to approach this for our area. So we were doing yearly health check. So it never used to be so high, but by using our PCN staff and targeting them, we have achieved a higher number. As you can see, the target is 60 to 80. We have done more than 80%. Similarly, there are high-risk cardiovascular disease patients. So every surgery has few who are very high risk. So we targeted them to reduce their smoking. They helped them with their weight management. As a PCN, we could do better than if we are left for the surgeries to just manage. So if surgery has 10 patients, they have got too many other patients, so they might get left out. But as a PCN, we targeted them. Similarly, young patients with diabetes, that is, they are very important for them to have the diabetes well controlled before they start a family, before they have a child. Because there are only, again, few numbers in a surgery, but as a PCN, we targeted and we helped them. Spirometry is one of the important features which helps people identify the type of breathing problems they have. Now the services were struggling, and we had 65 patients who were waiting for 9 to 12 months. But then we decided that we will do our own spirometry service. And so from December to March, we have done 267 patients. We did some summer events for patients. This is targeted for respiratory type diseases or diabetes. So these were specific patients who have got specific diseases, and we invited people like Diabetes UK team to come and talk about diabetes. This was not a clinician talking about it, but general population talking, general patients coming and talking about it. Now this ARR roles is one important thing. This is our staff. We did not have everybody, but we have around 31 additional role staff in our PCN. And they have provided around 100,000 more appointments to the patient. Maybe many of you have gotten a phone call from staff who is not the GP from the surgery. So we have got these people calling the patient for different purposes, for medication review, for physiotherapy and all. So if you look at earlier slide, we had 250,000 appointments, and if you add another 100,000, so as a PCN, for our 54,000 population, we have provided 350,000 appointments. So what I'm trying to say is, if we have a vision and we have support of the alliance like PAM and others, then we can really make a difference for the population there. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much to Pam and Dr. Basu for staying for this long and for going through, a great presentation in such detail. We can all appreciate both of your time, especially Dr. Basu, as you are, your time is precious. Given the success you've demonstrated through the integrated neighbourhood teams in Basildon, particularly the close working between health, local government and community partners, just to name a few, 50% reduction in A&E attendances among high frequency users, excellent. Improve access and uptake of preventative services, 31 new staff, more evidence-led referral protocols. You must be really excited about and looking forward to local government reorganisation, working across a much larger footprint, because it's about local leadership. That's what LGR is about, shared purpose, delivering smarter, more humane services. I have personal experience of working with the voluntary sector in Thurrock, and it's great. And of course, you'll be linking in with their GP practices, getting people like yourself, Dr. Basu, to break down those silos, to deliver this outcomes for working people. I think that the future's bright if we continue this kind of integrated working across a larger footprint in the region. I just wanted to say well done for everything you're doing, and if you've got any comments to come back on any of the points that I've made.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Lady Chairman. I think it's an interesting reflection that actually local government reform can really accelerate this, and I think we welcome that evolving place piece. And I think it isn't necessary to medicalise every condition. I heard the most wonderful definition of diabetes from a diabetes patient the other day. She's a person, and she said, diabetes is my third child, and when I go out the door I have to take everything a child would need to make sure that I'm safe. And that health burden constantly on somebody, it's hard having two children. You add another one in, that's a whole nother load of additional management, isn't it? And that never goes away. And as services, we need to be more streamlined. We need to stop people feeling like they're a medical burden and actually allow them to live their lives and do the prevention piece. And that is not through sitting in a queue at 8 o'clock in the morning and waiting to see a GP. It's about empowerment and agency. It's about accessing different services. It's about the environment that we live in, and it's about making good health choices right in that prevention space. I'm really proud of what we've achieved here in a short space of time in Basildon, and I think that it's indicative of the sort of partnerships and the can-do attitude we've got down here, and the fact that we have some of the highest rates of cardiovascular disease in Basildon. Let's not let's not shy away from it. This is not on its own going to solve the cardiovascular disease presentation. We still have a huge amount of work to do. The risk of stroke and heart attack in our population is significant. But actually, what we want to do is roll this across, and the model that Dr. Basu's worked so hard with my team and others, and we'll talk about some of the incentives, I'm sure, shortly, to make this a wider approach. But you know, we've worked really hard, and with Grant and colleagues bringing us housing officers, working in the lived environment, all of those sorts of things. Actually, we have co-commissioned this together. So you will see some of the agencies that have pitched up in that 60 is Sports for Confidence, it's ATF, it's charities that you and I have supported as statutory organisations over a long period of time. So this is a different way of looking at it. It's a very different way, but it's what neighbourhood health and the challenge we've been set for the next government term. It's that. We did it out of necessity, not out of political, sort of guidance. We did it out of necessity, and we did it with the guidance of Claire Fuller's work, who's an eminent GP who's worked in Surrey to look at how do we sustain our GP practices as that very valuable resource. Because the building of new homes, the demand with our ageing population, only means that those slots that are freed up from those that are coming 10 times or more will be used to manage more complex presentations. You know, we have to enable that to happen. So this doesn't mean anybody has a lighter workload. It means that they have a more satisfying workload, and we can go to those people that need us the most first. So, Will, did you want to come in on anything there? Just, you're the Director of Primary Care, and I think it's important that you sat here all night, that we give you the opportunity.
Thank you, Pam. And I would just say as well, to an untrained eye looking at the presentation, there was an element of an underscore of this is what we can take right now, and kind of questions about capacity were coming through. But I think as we've said, that this town is changing, is growing out of necessity. We all know that good developments have Section 106 agreements, which means that new GP surgeries will be built as a result of more people moving into the borough. So I think I just want to say that, this is a great approach for the future in terms of, our housing crisis and growing population going hand in hand to make sure that silos are being broken, messaging is going across organisations, more people are being helped in a kind of non-medical way, because we've seen social prescribing is it's the worst name in the world for something that's so amazing that sometimes you don't need a bottle of pills from the doctor, you need to join a gardening club, you need to go for a run, play tennis with one of your fellow members. There's things you can do in your life that really don't require that acute care, and that's what's really going to change the game, I think, if more people are socially prescribed. And I know that the council is introducing a social prescribing platform, which is really exciting, which means that there'll be a single point of view for every single resident who gets in touch with us or our partners about a health or well-being issue. And I just think it's going to be such a game changer. And I'd just say about communications, so comms is really important. A lot of your work, I would just say, it goes unnoticed, I would say, at this level. I know that I was an elected member to the Alliance, and I've been on a break. And it's just to say that how do we make sure that communication goes to, the new chief executive, the leader of the council, as well as, the people who attend, because decisions are being made and we want to feel like a valued partner. Basildon is so much more complex than Brentwood. We know that. We know that we have more, acute health issues that we're looking at. We've got a larger population, a younger population. Yeah, so we're not dealing with social care as much, perhaps here. We're dealing with here and now care. So I just say, what improvements can we make to make sure that Basildon is, making these decisions alongside other members of the Alliance going forward?
Yeah, and it's a good challenge, Lady Chairman. I think it's important that you know that you are a valued partner, and we couldn't have achieved this without the support of Grant and colleagues, changing the narrative in the meetings that we've got, that we're not just looking at health through a health lens, that we're actually looking at it through that wider determinants of health approach. I think there's more for the future about how we jointly commission, and I think there is a challenge around our communications. You know, that there absolutely is. I don't think we were as confident in this until we had the ability to evaluate the data. You know, this comes relatively new to you as a new way of working, and I think we're very proud of it now, and we want to shout about it, and we want to get it in more PCNs. We have a delivery plan now to roll this across all of the 6 PCNs in Basildon and Brentwood, and the 24 across Mid and South Essex. They will be rolling out the process mapping and the use of the workforce in the way that we've identified here. They will have the ability to determine what population needs there are, of course. You know, you can't say that it's in, Thurrock and every PCN that it's mental health as a presentation. It could be, frailty. But we have to go at scale now to deliver this, because that's the way that our services will be maintained. And actually our workforce will stay locally if we work in this way, because it's a gratifying way of work. It's not a frustrating referral-based way of work. It's a team where you can have a conversation, you can troubleshoot something together and then reduce the duplication. You don't sit writing paper referrals to people you don't know. You know, actually what Dr. Basu's done with the wider team is the organisational development. I think so regularly gets missed in these sorts of changes. It's about building teams and building trust so that actually, you don't scrutinise everything. You're confident in that trusted assessor. The social prescriber is a massive change. It's a game changer. And you're right, the name to our residents means absolutely nothing. And we need to get better at marketing what that is. But actually, social prescribers are very proud of the role that they fulfil. So it's become an identity. So moving away from that is kind of tricky now. But I think with your help getting into your residents that live in the properties we've been talking about today, there's a targeted piece of work that, we need to make sure that those offers and that demand profile, they get a better experience, because actually no one wants to spend 10 times going to A&E or 10 times sitting in front of the GP practice. It's no one wants to feel that frustrated or unable to navigate the system. We want people right place, right time.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Grant, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Joseph.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think my colleagues will see me on the mic now and start rolling their eyes, because I'll always speak to all of my colleagues around the fact that we all work in health. It's whether we're working for the NHS or otherwise. All of our services really are about improving the health and well-being of our residents, whether that's about tackling fear of crime in communities. Fear of crime absolutely pacifies communities and means that they're not out there, not active, not meeting people. Whether it's about collecting the rubbish, whether it's about providing good housing, whatever we do, it's about improving communities' health. I think one of the challenges and one of the opportunities we have is, you saw in Dr. Basu's slides there, that role that had made up a neighbourhood team. It's still very medicalised, but we offer lots of services that would be able to. So I think part of our challenge is, what are our roles in with regards to the concept of being on the end of the line for that neighbourhood team, whether it's housing officers, whether it's environmental health officers, whether it's sport and community officers and the like. I think that's a real opportunity to do more. I think the PCNs and our area committees, the geography don't quite align, but I have done some work on how we might be able to do better with that. So I think there's something also about getting our area committee chairs to meet with their PCN leads and therefore start to talk a little bit around what's happening in their community. And that might be around health facilities, but it also might be around noticing actually there's just not enough sport, physical activity support for young people in that area, and it might be something for the area committees want to commission, knowing that they've heard that from the GPs that there's a gap there. Could be in relation to mental health support in schools or anything of the like. So I think that's perhaps where the great challenges is. And then when we look at what the government have asked in relation to manoeuvring from acute to community, that's what we're talking about here. When we're talking about treatment to prevention, that's what we're talking about here. So I think our role in this is absolutely significant. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Councillor Torrey Joseph, would you like to come in?
Oh yes, so it was literally just bouncing off what Grant said about young people, because looking at the slides, I did see that it was quite a high percentage, said 80% of young people, and you mentioned anxiety and those type of things. I just wanted to know how are we obviously tackling these issues, and are we working with schools, and you know what provisions are being made available to help bring these numbers down.
So yeah, across the Integrated Care Board, there is a significant amount of work with children's services and early intervention services. And I think, you know, what we have in a GP is the ability to see a huge range of presentations and work and trend what happens. So we've seen post-COVID the presentation of young children with anxiety, social anxiety. We've seen speech deficit, late toilet training, all sorts of things. And actually the support that can be offered through peer support, through those charities, through just normalising that, you know, in a mum's group that's been developed through ATF, actually just to talk about it, is making the link that actually it's very difficult for a GP to prescribe out the way of a child's mental health presentation. It so often is about how do we do those early interventions, counselling, link people up together, work with the school. You know, yes, we've got high levels of ADHD and it's causing health a challenge in its commissioning. We're very honest about that. But actually together, we can work through that, and we can work through that. Our GPs have a big role in supporting those individuals. So there's lots happening. You know, we can't cover it all tonight, but there certainly is lots happening. I'm sure Dr. Basu would like to come in.
In our ARR scheme that we could employ different staff, there was an option of employing mental health practitioner. So which we took, that was for adults. And then we realized the need for the children. So we have got one children and young persons mental health practitioner. They work for that lady works for the PCN. She comes to the surgeries, and if we find a child who is anxious, anxiety, early signs, we book the patient, we book the child with the mental health practitioner, and she's seen, the child is seen within a week or two. So it's very quick, the first thing, and then if they need further services, of course, they refer to the proper services. So that was the new thing that we employed around 1 year. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say as well, the success of the Central Basildon PCN really shows what's possible when local services work in true partnership. And I just want to say, you touched on children's services and social care, and as you're aware, Basildon Borough Council does not have those services. Okay, so we're always dealing with the kind of softer elements of well-being and health. But I think by exiting the Essex County Council structure going forward, talking back to LGR, you know, we will be part of an authority that's directly aligned with the PCN. We'll have more statutory services like adult social care, public health, community transport, all under one local authority. And we've got housing now. There's more to do there, as we've seen this evening. But, you know, I think there's a lot of possibility. You know, what's stopping us from backing local delivery with the powers and structures it needs to thrive? You know, I think that is still so really positive. And I'll bring in Councillor Terry Sargent.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your presentations and insight into what you're doing. I thought it was extremely interesting, and I'm very much a supporter of it. I just wanted to ask if you were aware of the South Essex breastfeeding group. They run locally at our village hall, and they provide, most of them are volunteers, and I mean, I got them through grants many years ago, and they've been there for a few years, and the work that they do in helping young mums to breastfeed, because when now you go into hospital, have your baby, there's not really the time. And I just wanted to know if it was on your, if they were on your, on the doctor's books or on the books there somewhere, because the service that they provide, they used to be called the Basildon and Thurrock breastfeeding group, but they've now gone over, changed name to the South Essex. And I just wanted to give a shout out for them, because what they do, it's not just in my local village, it's all over South Essex now. So I mean, if they're on your books, because that is something, and I was speaking to them last week, and when you think of the price of formula now, it is so vital that those young babies, even if it's only for 3 months, get that real good, slug of mummy's milk, so that it'll give them a good start in life. So I'm sure Grant can give you their details, but if it's a service that they are so fantastic of, and I think they provide it free as well. So anyhow, thanks for that.
Yeah, I think.
No, I just want to jump in and just say I've been there myself to Notebridge as well. Yes, because it's really important to get out of the house when you've got little kids. And I didn't really have a great question for them, but they really made me feel welcome, made me a cup of tea, gave me a biscuit, let my little one run around and I just think it was such a lovely thing. It just really lifted my mood, and I think that's a huge element of social prescribing as well.
Yeah, and you've gone after something after my own heart, Councillor Toshka. So honestly, it's very difficult to get breastfeeding rates up in this country. We have some of the lowest in Europe, but we know the evidence is very, very strong that it helps babies and their health. And you're absolutely right that the price of formula is significantly high now. What I think we need to do is absolutely, as a range of partners, is work on breastfeeding acceptance. That's not just mums, that's dads. And that's about locations, cafes, businesses, all of the facilities. If you can't store breast milk, you can't, and you want to continue feeding. If you can't store it at work, you can't go back to work, you have to stop feeding. Actually, we should enable our staff to be able to have the best experience of breastfeeding. And we are all anchor organisations. So, it is absolutely possible for us to support our staff to have the best experience possible. And definitely that's somewhere where I'll be volunteering. I had a neonate intensive care, and the volunteers still enabled me to breastfeed. Despite him being in an incubator, and if that can be done, it can be done. And my mum friend had a baby that was £1.11, and they still managed to get them to breastfeed eventually. So, and that's volunteer based. And actually, it's the volunteers that have got the experience. It's the volunteers that have got the time. It's such an important place. It's the volunteers that follow you home. That's where absolutely. Giving back, I will certainly volunteer in that space when I'm not quite so busy in the NHS myself. But it's a challenge. It should be something that we all take as partners, because breastfeeding friendly cafes, shops. I returned to work and I asked if I could express. I was offered the disabled toilet. When I was at a conference, and I did suggest that, would you like your child's dinner to be prepared in the toilet, at which the well-intended gentleman that offered me the toilet said, I don't have any children, which wasn't the answer I was looking for. So we do need all to take that conscious into our minds around enabling mums to feed. So, but thank you. they will be absolutely connected to our GP practices through Grant.
Through Grant, more work for Grant. So I just want to say it's about design, isn't it? It's about designing the areas. I've just got a message saying that my baby is currently at DEFCON 4. So I think that we need to wrap up unless there's any, further questions that want to come in. Happy to accommodate. I just want to really thank Pam and Dr. Basu and Will at the end there, just for coming and spending your time with us. And you went through a lot to get to your time, and we really appreciate that. Keep up the great work, and let's bring on local government organisations so you can have even more great work to do.
So we'll circulate our slides. We'll also circulate the performance slides that we haven't had time to do, but I wanted you to have the context of the shift that's happening in health because then evaluating community services, they will all look different if we, make this true left shift into early intervention and the modalities that we've talked about. We'll also come back to a scrutiny. Maybe not following your Morgan Sindall colleagues. We'll perhaps do it differently next time. But we obviously there is significant changes to the architecture around commissioning of health and the structure of how we achieve these sorts of projects. My boss, Tom Abel, will happily come when we know more about what that initiative looks like. And we will also continue to talk to you about the performance of local organisations and statutory organisations. But this context is very, very important because actually we do not want to stay the way that we are now. We want to have that strategic initiative to work with you in a very, very different way. So continued thanks to Grant and all the team. The housing officers, Kirsty, did an incredible piece of education to all the GPs in Basildon and Brentwood around housing. And I hope that has reduced the demand on your team, as well as reducing the frustration on GPs like Dr. Basu, because writing letters that don't change anything is pointless. So educating each other on how our organisations work can enable more efficient use of time and resources. So we must come together on those touch points wherever we can. So thank you very much for your time, and we will come back.
I just want to say for the clerk, please record those actions for us, and wish you all a very good evening. Good night.